All right. Hey, everyone. You're here with Mark Batwell on Perfect Gardens TV. So today, really honestly, I never know what's going to come from these episodes. The reason why we kind of show up on Sundays, it's kind of like just a practice and making sure we're making an effort to meet as a community so that we keep refining our skills. When I was wrestling in high school and college, they would always say 10,000 hours of training for 6 minutes of live wrestling mat time. And it's the same thing here. It's a few of the guys really have let us know that, hey, we appreciate you keeping us kind of disciplined and engaged, because before we were letting our gardens go, but now we're knowing that someone's going to check up on us on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, and the gardens are coming alive. So at the end of the day, like I always start most of these calls, is we try to circle around the guys and say what's been going on in the last couple of weeks, what's interesting, any problems, people problems, where's the market at, what's happening right now. It's the flooded season, right? There's probably a lot of like, what do we do with the product? So these are the types of conversations we try to once again engage with on a daily basis. And then once again, 2 times a month, we share that content all the way to the point where we get to the point where we say, hey, I don't know. And then we try to wrap it up at that point. All right. So Dave, please go ahead and share your screen. And the first guy, if you could, any problems? I think we're going to go ahead and start with Rob. Rob, what's been going on? What have you been learning this week? And then maybe the second guy, please raise your hand and we'll go ahead and unmute you. And we'll start to dive in and collect some problems.
Sure. Sure. So, yeah, I started getting into some really interesting stuff. Really started to dive into the plant health pyramid with John Kemp, and it was pretty amazing stuff. He started to really explain how if you start doing certain things at complete levels, that inevitably plant health is just paramount, and it happens. And it started with a complete photosynthesis, and then complete protein synthesis, then lipid synthesis, and then it started producing these secondary metabolites that was really, in addition to making things healthy, was making them immune to pests and disease and all this other pretty amazing stuff, which stuff that I had never heard. I feel like all these different people that I've started to learn stuff from, they kind of focus on one thing. He has like the plant health pyramid, whereas Elaine Ingham was doing more, fungi and bacteria. And it all ties together, but the level of focus in which they do it was a little different. And then that and some Korean natural farming was getting into as well. So all really interesting stuff.
All right, so we're definitely going to bring you on and talk a little bit more about this and open this up to discussion. And why is this important, right? You always have that one person that's initially like the trailblazer, right? They're eating away at the rocks, but then you kind of need the other bacteria and the other fungi to start breaking down the other types of minerals going on, right? And so that's what you said, John Kemp, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so John Kemp is, in my viewpoint, one of those other bacterias or trace minerals that broke off as she was trailblazing, and a few others as well, trailblazing, and he's going in and diving in deeper in another section into our soil. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this. How about another guy? Anything else going on? Problems this week? Abe, too, is there any problems, like clients that have issues going on with them going on? Obviously, you probably can't share specifics, but obviously, is there people problems or general specifics?
I think for us, the market's still a biggest challenge. So we in Canada, we've got a micro cultivation clients, and for them, if they're growing quads and trips, they want about $4.50 a gram, but the price right now is often around $3 a gram. So it's a little tighter. Most of them have to sell to a larger producer processor, because they don't have a sales amendment. So those are some of the challenges. So it's always coming down to how do you reduce your cost of production and still maintain a high enough quality to produce quads. But just following up on Rob's comment, just that whole idea. I mean, if you're going to produce quads, a lot of it, especially if you're using kind of a living soil approach, you definitely have to capitalize on optimizing photosynthesis and then getting the proper metabolism to produce those secondary metabolites. And so it is, yeah, a lot of interesting research coming out, which is kind of nice. Hopefully the US will get federally legal, and then we'll have all the benefit of all the universities there to do some great research. And University of Guelph leads cannabis research here in Canada. Another good paper coming out, just looking at some of the it's all the legacies work, but putting the academy behind a lot of that legacy work. Kind of interesting stuff coming out of University of Guelph.
Yeah, quick question: is the industry going over to the maple industry? How it's controlled in Canada?
Oh, sorry, is it going
to the maple industry? Like, isn't the maple industry like heavily controlled, where everyone sends the maple to, like, the government buys it all and then they redistribute it? Is it something like that, or I saw a documentary on Netflix, but you never know what's true or not.
No, because I think maybe Quebec is the largest maple producer in Canada, but the small eastern provinces have smaller amounts. But it isn't like well organized in that sense yet. But in cannabis, each province, much like every state, dictates how they want to do their own sales. There is a federal tax, but everything else is, if they want to do farm gate sales, that province decides whether they want to do farm gate sales or however it's done. So
I appreciate that. Maybe we'll get a little bit more into regulation in Canada. Dave, what's going on your side?
So I want to bring up an issue that I recently came across, and with one of my plants, one of the 5 plants. And I kind of want to remind people that if you're going the organic route and you're mending your soils maybe a week or 2 prior, that you really have to give it time to get those engines starting, get the microbial life going. And a good example of this is what I currently went through about a week ago, where I don't know, about after the first note or so, they're young plants. I started seeing 2 leaves with what appears to be calcium deficiency. And taking my time, I didn't take any action because I know what I put in that soil. And like, if you look at what I put in there, there's way more enough calcium that's in there as a potential, just waiting to be broken down. So fast forward about a week or so, there's no further signs. So don't be discouraged if you go organics and then you start maybe seeing minor deficiencies. Let the soil, let the plant get those symbiotic relationships, get that engine going. It's at idle. And once it starts amping up, you're going to see that a lot of the problems don't need the necessary action of applying more. And this is where it's really important to know what you're adding. Look at the bag again. Look at all the contents, and I'd be like, okay, this had 6% calcium, this had 7% calcium. The plant's only 10 days old, 12 days old. I don't need to add CalMag. I don't need to add anything. And the importance of just letting that ecosystem start to form that symbiotic relationship for the plant.
I think that's also marking that down, and maybe everyone sharing their viewpoint and opinion. Jason, also, I want to definitely want to get his viewpoint opinion on when you top dress. So when you let's say you're midway through your grow, and the back of the dry amendment says 1 to 2 tablespoons per gallon of soil. How much do you top dress? Are you top dressing the total amount of soil that you have in that pot? Are you top dressing half? Are you how much are you top dressing, and when to expect for actually it to take effect or become bioavailable to the plants? I think that's a really interesting topic, because we ran into Jason. We talked about it for a second. I think there was a little bit of what was it? Phosphorus. I don't think we got into it yet, but it was definitely something at the end we were running to a toxicity or a deficiency. We just hadn't had a chance to get into it. Jason?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I had a phosphorus and a calcium problem.
So it sounded like a phosphorus toxicity or potassium toxicity, which caused a secondary calcium. Because that's what
I did
happens
have-
normally, right?
I don't know if you remember early on in the grow, in the first week of veg, I actually had a calcium deficiency. I started getting the brown spots on the leaves. I didn't add anything to it because I was doing a transplant like a couple days later. So, and that resolved the problem. But I did have the red, the purple stems at the leaves throughout the grow. It did not quite help it. So I might have been at, the law of minimums or something like that was locking me out maybe.
This is actually something I'd love to get anyone's opinion on. And this one is the I always forget the name, but the part that connects the leaves to the stem, it starts with the P. Yes, thank you. So that's a sign for phosphorus deficiency, that side being purple. And I've seen that purple fade away, to the point where it's green. So I know, but a lot of people say, oh, it's genetics. A lot of times it's genetics. And so I'm always, I'd love to get your opinion. Should we not depend on that part turning purple as a sign for a phosphorus deficiency?
No, I actually think that's a classic look for a phosphorus deficiency, is to see that characteristic petiole and actually where the leaflets join. If that turns purple, whereas your newer growth does not show that purpling, that's a good sign that in fact you do have a phosphorus deficiency. If your new growth already has that purpling, then that's probably a characteristic. That's your characteristic purple. That's genetic, and you can leave it at that. But if you can see some changing, throughout the plant, where some of it's purple, some of it's green, I think that's a very, that and the leaf color is often a good sign of phosphorus deficiency, until you have that extended phosphorus deficiency where you get real bronzing, where you've probably gone past. And just to comment about phosphorus deficiency, I mean, we tend to put way too much on, but it is critical. Like, phosphorus is incredibly critical in all alkaloid production. So if you want high THC, you do need your phosphorus in there.
Calcium, too much calcium, it ends up inhibiting phosphorus and potassium uptake, correct?
Definitely influences calcium uptake if you have too much phosphorus, and vice versa, right? Too much calcium will definitely inhibit phosphorus uptake, as well as zinc and iron.
So would you recommend decreasing the calcium to increase potassium intake, or would you recommend increasing potassium to kind of counterbalance the calcium?
Yeah, it's one of those big challenges of never knowing what your true deficiency is, or if you have an excess of something. So if you really know what your soil has and what you've been adding, you can almost guess that maybe I've been adding too much potassium because I've been using potassium sulfate or lots of kelp or something. Or if you've been using a lot of magnesium sulfate, you're one of the fans of Epsom salts and use a lot of it, and you have higher levels of magnesium, that too can cause both a potassium and calcium deficiency. So if you know what you've been doing and you think that might be the reason, yes, then I would go the other way and say, maybe I should try to increase my calcium or decrease my potassium.
I appreciate it, Dave. Mike, so any problems this week? Situations, what's going on up in Canada on your side?
Yeah, actually, guys, earlier this week, I was having a magnesium deficiency. So I started giving CalMag like a lot of you suggested. Now, my question is, first week of transition into the 12-hour cycle, how long will I continue giving this magnesium? Because
the CalMag, you mean?
Yeah, the CalMag, because when I had good steady growth all through the week, I'm hitting my vegetation expectations, I'm getting the height. The plants look great. The deficiency stopped. Okay, it's from the lower to the mid of the plant. and then it fades out, and then the last 18 inches of the plant on the new growth, there is no more signs of anything. Everything looks good. So I was just wondering, I know you're not supposed to give it in too far into flower, so does anybody wants to share some thoughts on that? I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd love to open this up. This is always a very interesting topic. I've gotten a lot of kickback this year over this, because I tell people, I would start backing off on the calcium when you see the plant stop growing. When you see it stop stretching, I recommend to stop giving it the CalMag and probably transition to a phosphorus potassium product, or like a Langminite, or there's sometimes you see a high potash in a seaweed kelp extract as well. One of the brands up in Canada has it like that as well. And I'd love to open that topic up to discussion too, because I seeing some of the problems through guiding some of my guys through it is we're running into a toxicity in the phosphorus and potassium, even though we're dealing with Langminite or the seaweed from the Gaia Green, that they have a seaweed one that's like a 0016 or something like that. So I'd love to talk about that more, because that's water soluble, and when we're trying to boost that up on the back end, does anyone recommend how much we should be putting in there? Because I'm running into this toxicity, and I'm wondering, is it because we're dealing with a dryback within the soil, which salts are drying up, or are we dealing with maybe we're adding a little too much, through the recommendations of the back of the box, and following the recommendations, should we be giving a lot less than what they're actually recommending? Does anyone have any recommendations on that, or just a topic of conversation people want to discuss their experience on?
Are you talking about like using Langminite in the later stages, or because like Langminite, this is, if you're looking at the ingredients, is highly water soluble, so the magnesium and everything. So you can start off with a smaller dose. I personally found with the Langminite, I did about like half a dose on one plant that needed it, that was showing a little bit of sign of potassium issues.
When you say half a dose, what did that mean though? Like, how big are your pots?
So those were 3-gallon pots, and per the manufacturer's recommendations, it was down to earth. It was 1 teaspoon per gallon of soil. So I did half of what they recommended, and that's all I ended up needing. And knowing that it was more water soluble and more readily available for the plants, and being that late in the stage, I'm assuming that the microbial life and everything's amped up as well, because the plant is flourishing and doing very well. So if my recommendations, if the product has more water solubility for what specific nutrient you're looking for, you can always start off on the lighter end, wait a few days, and start increasing it, because you're still giving it what it needs. It might not be to the fullest. It still is hungry for more, but then you can come back and add a little bit more. Because of that water solubility.
How much are you giving it? Are you giving it to a water ratio, like gallons of water you're mixing, or are you giving that dry amount to soil ratio? So it's like 1 teaspoon.
When I did it with the Langminite, I measured out the half of what was needed per the gallon of soil, and I actually diluted with the water to see what physically was dissolving and what mineral base was left over in that, and it was very minimal. So it did tell me that most of that was water soluble, and then the chunks that were left over, I didn't want to put through my sprayer, so I put on the top. But I started off with half, and it ended up being fine until the day of harvest.
Mike, did you have something to add to this? And then Adam, after you.
Yeah, sorry guys, I'm miking. Dave, the only thing I agree with what you're doing. I'm curious, when you are applying these products, I know you're a fan of bottom watering. When you are applying, are you doing it a top dressing, or are you putting that in your bottom when you're bottom watering at the same time? Do you do it both ends?
No, that's a good question. So in this case, the Langminite was mixed in with water. But if I am doing a top dressing of, let's say, a 444 or a 284, I'm going to do a combination of both. So I like to water it in from the top to let gravity help me, and then I like the full saturation through the bottom. It's just something that I believe in my practices. And what I find is, because I have all this different organic matter that's making up the total mass in my pots, like pieces like bark or sticks. Those take longer to absorb moisture than other parts of the immediate soil. So from me going to the bottom and letting it soak up until it stops soaking, I know that I have a nice even fully saturation, where if I only water a little bit from the top, then, you know, it might not be fully saturated. So if I'm top dressing, which is only going to be a few times during the whole grow, then it's a combination of both.
Jason, real quick, add in what were you doing with your Langminite at the end of your grow too? And then we're going to jump over to Adam and Johnny as well. Jason.
Yeah, sorry. What were you asking me?
What did you do with your Langminite feeding toward the end of your grow?
I just did
yeah,
top dressing.
top dressing. So dry amendment, water it in.
Yeah, it was just top dressing. Am I still muted?
No, you're not muted. We can hear you.
Yeah, I just did it with the top dressing. Whatever I top dress with, I mixed it in with that, and then I watered it in, is what I did. I didn't dilute it with the water first or anything. And
How much did you add?
I used the recommended per gallon.
Per gallon of soil or per gallon of for water you're adding in?
It was per soil.
Okay, so you had a 7-gallon pot. You mixed in 7 teaspoons of Langminite and then watered in after that.
Yeah,
I'm wondering.
After that, I'm sorry, I had a phone call coming in.
No, it's okay. I'm wondering potentially if we might have solved our issue right there was because watering in a highly water soluble product. I'm wondering if it's possibly just causing toxicity on the top of the soil as it was watering in. Abe, I'd like to hear your thought on that.
I'd be interested in finding out. I didn't think Langminite was overly water soluble. Unless you're using, like, I think Roots Organics might have a liquid Langminite, but I think you'd have to treat Langminite with an acid to make it water soluble. So anyone have
has a soluble one too.
Sorry, Jason, what was that?
I said Down to Earth has a soluble one too.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the back of the help us out. The back of the box says 60% water soluble, and you know that, but that would be, you know, when they say water soluble and it's a little crystal rock, like, you know, if you put a salt in a water, it takes a while for it to break down and dissolve into the water. So, I mean, how water soluble is it actually?
Also too, I wanted to add chicken. Could chicken guano be the answer to that question? Because it is it does a good job of breaking down, but it's very strong, very high in nitrogen. So I don't know, maybe that could help.
It just, you know, in my mind, the opposite, that the nitrogen could be the opposite of what we're looking for because of, but I don't, you know, I would say we got
to shoot it out there.
No, it's helpful. No, thank you, Adam. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I apologize. Johnny, what were you going to say?
With what I did on my last run with the Langminite, I did half dry and half I mixed with the tea, and it seemed to work. And after it bubbled for 24 hours, there weren't any crystals at the bottom. So it seemed to work for me. I don't see any deficiencies.
So you're saying that you got a teaspoon per gallon for soil, just to be really clear. Then you got half of it. So 3.5 teaspoons you top dress, and then 3.5 teaspoons you put it in a bubbler and then fed it in.
Correct.
And you didn't, after it, you didn't see any.
I mean, it was for 24 hours. So after 24 hours, I didn't see any crystals at the bottom when I got to the bottom of the bucket. They could have somehow gotten to the cup, like, because I always stir up the water too, you know, to make sure it's not just sitting. And, you know, maybe like I used a solo cup to dip down in there. Maybe some of them came out, but I didn't, even in the cup, there weren't any granular stuff in there. So it just seemed to work.
I'm just putting a hypothesis out there. I think genuinely what we're dealing with possibly through these toxicities could be a watering, our watering, like watering it in, top feeding process. I could be wrong, but it just feels like that at some level. Galaxy S20, just because you want, what do you got, brother?
Yeah. Hello. Just from hearing everyone talk, I don't have any personal experience with this, but based on the solubility statement, it would make sense that different water, hardness or softness could be interacting with it and maybe causing it to not be so soluble. So aerating it in a compost tea might actually be breaking it down so that it is more soluble. And maybe that's why he had better results versus the other people who still had the salts or the coarse particles not fully broken down. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, that goes along with what Abe said about an acid, right? When you bubble, it releases more CO2 from the water, which more oxygen, and it oxidizes the Langminite. Does that sound kind of correct, Abe, or anyone that kind of knows a little bit more about science? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that whole weathering action, that's definitely what is making things more soluble, increasing the surface area by that whole action. So I think that does definitely make things more available. But I also wanted to just, I think what we're noticing here is even our outdoor environment's changing a lot, and so in our gardens, if they're indoor. And you're bringing in some outside air, your VPD is also going to be changing quite a bit. And so it's important to recognize that were any of your environmental conditions, did they change significantly in the last couple of weeks or something like that? Because that could also translate to poor uptake of nutrients. So some of the deficiencies, definitely looking at my own, greenhouse, we've had some dramatic shifts in temperatures, daytime, nighttime temperatures, and I think that's translating to some calcium deficiencies. Just as Rob started mentioning that, Dave mentioned that he saw a little bit of calcium deficiency in his young plants. That's what we were noticing, but it had nothing to do with calcium in the soil. It was just, my VPD was way off because of bringing in too much outside air.
Do you how much of a swing do you see, and are those swings like in the ranges where the environment should be decent, but just the swing is too much, or are you seeing the swing being super low, incredibly high, and that's what you're seeing?
Yeah, in our case, our furnace ran out of oil, so we had. I didn't recognize that until the second day when I looked back, and I came in early in the morning and saw that it was only 50 when it should have been closer to 72. So we would normally go from 83 down to, at this time of year, about 72, 75. It went down to 50. So yeah,
that's interesting. So only 2 days you started to see plant deficiencies within a 20-degree drop. That's incredibly important to have a mental registration, because if you're an outdoor grower, greenhouse, and tell me if I'm wrong, any of you guys call me out, if you're seeing weather patterns or something like a mechanic, like something on the equipment breaks down, this is where you be like, okay, something just broke, or like you said, your heater system, grab the plastics, let's cover them up, give them a little more insulation, do something if it's important to you, or if your crop or how much you're growing can support the cost of what it takes to actually do something like that, and be more aggressive to reducing your overall yield or reduction of your health of your plants. Johnny, do you have another question?
Yeah, I was good to know that that the vapor pressure doesn't, when the temperature goes down like that, it doesn't let the plant take up the nutrients like that, like it should. I never thought about that because there was a couple of days where I didn't have my heater on, and the temperature changed on me, and it dropped for a couple of days, and I was like, wow, that's kind of different. I could see the difference in the way the plants looked, but they didn't show anything deficient, but it was just, that's probably why they had a little reaction, because they weren't used to that cold real fast like that. But I knew that there was that they do react to cold, but I didn't realize when it got cool like that they just don't take up the nutrients like they should. But that's good to know.
I've also noticed how fast bugs come in. Like if you have, we're in Colorado, right? So if we always have an early snowfall, and if that snowfall lasts for 48 hours, I'm getting aphids or I'm getting whiteflies guaranteed. They follow with that snow, even though it dries out still for another month. It seems like they will follow, or something will happen within this. If the snow melts off within 24 hours, because in Boulder you can melt off really quickly. I don't seem to have bug issues, but if it lasts past 2 days, and it was kind of a mental note. You said it, and I was just like, oh, interesting. That's why I never really thought about the time of length, but I wonder if there is a period where there's a certain amount of like the DNA or something, or certain type of DNA on the plant shuts down, or certain type of microbial starts to start back up if it starts to drop down in temperature or something. It's like, okay, signaling, all right, come eat me. It's faster than what we're thinking. Guys, anything else?
Yeah, did the cold to the both of the gentlemen there that had their temperatures drop, did it affect your plants in any color changes that would indicate phosphorus, like purple, or and also too, did they wilt, or as far as when they look different? I wanted to know, like, what was kind of going more into detail. Like in what way did they look different because of that temperature change?
Hey, we got PM in 2 days. In 2 days, we got PM
right there. Oh, interesting.
It was like it's great.
Yeah,
it's a teaching class, so it's nice to be able to now. I brought out the old hypochlorous acid, which isn't a registered pesticide, but I just wanted to show the class that, hey, this works. And we'll typically go with hydrogen peroxide at this level. It was sort of in the I think it's probably around the 4th week of flower. So, but yeah, 2 days of just dropping down to about 50 at night, or having that shift of 20 degrees. Like we're okay with maybe a sort of a 10-degree shift, but 20 degrees, and that's what we did. So
is there a possibly talking about a preventative solution if cold, you think about it, right? If cold's coming in, should we be proactive, spray something on the plants the day before it gets cold, so that there is an additional resilience to it, and I don't know, what do you guys suggest? That was just so that we know we're walking into the problem. What I mean? Do we try to be proactive with just plastics and trying to keep plants dry in a healthier environment, which obviously but do we also try to go into a natural pesticide or fungicide if we have time? Johnny?
Could just try to maintain the VPD.
Oh, maintain the VPD, you said, Jason? Maintain the VPD. That's what Abe's saying. Abe's shaking. He's like, okay.
Yeah, well, when
I apologize.
when your temperature goes down, you want to dry things up, right?
Say that one more time, Jason.
When the temperature goes down, the humidity goes up, and that screws your VPD up. So you might want to, if you're expecting your temperatures to drop, you might want to turn on your dehumidifier to help keep that VPD in its proper range, and maybe your plants will still be able to take up whatever they need to take up. Because we're talking about VPD and how when you have a 20-degree temperature drop, that really screws up your VPD. Humidity goes up, and now your plants can't even aspirate or whatever they need to do, because it's just all messed up. So I was thinking that on a logical thing there, if the humidity goes up, you want to drop it down, and that would be running your dehumidifier to keep your VPD in check, and that would help the plants stay healthy, right?
Absolutely. More consistent growing environment. Hayes, what do you got, brother? Thank you, Jason. I always appreciate all of you guys' input on this. It's a nice little conversation. Hayes, brother.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Sorry,
We'll go with you, Mike, later next, and then on Johnny.
one thing is as a preventative, just for also maintaining health of the leaf itself, is silica. Making sure you're maintaining your good silica levels, because it helps keep the plant cuticle. It keeps it thick and in an unhospitable environment for the actual spores of PM to actually start flourishing. It kind of messes with the actual.
Silica rock, or what type of silica chemical do you suggest? Do you know the chemical compounds? How many different types of silicas are on the market for a liquid? Do you know does anyone know anything? I don't know much about that. I
have two different forms. I use a veg bloom, which is like it's a foliar spray for veg. So it'll help you get your silica in, as well as calcium, and it also has some kelp in there. And then there's also Power SI, so it's like a monosilicic acid. So it's already like a chelated form, so that way it's already being able to be uptaken by the plants without having to have it be broken down in the actual soil itself.
And you said the second one?
It does create a thicker cuticle in the leaf, and you can actually see that in the actual cuticle itself. Is what like protects the stomata and the cells beneath it and all that. It protects it from the drought, extreme temperatures.
What's the name of the product? What's the name of the product? And Dave, will you pull it up real quick and share your screen so everyone can see the brand name?
It would be Power SI.
Power SI?
Yeah. And it's nothing to really completely worry about, because it is an ionic form that the plant takes up. So it's not going to harm your microbes or anything. As long like the microbes are pretty much resilient enough to withstand that. You have to pretty much douse them with salt in order to completely kill them.
So when you're using the product, how long until you start to see a benefit after using it? Is it you said a foliar, or is it also root feed into your regular nutrients?
Veg bloom is the foliar, so it's like veg plus bloom, and that's the brand.
And okay, the other one is foliar.
Yeah, and then the other one is Power SI, and that's the root application.
And how long until you start to see a benefit to using it? Fairly immediate, or it works, so you've been using it for a while?
You can literally see the difference in the cuticle of the leaves. It'll I believe Av was talking about it in the podcast that you posted the other day about you'll notice like a waxy layer on the outside of the leaf. That's the actual thickness of the cuticle. It's getting thicker itself, and the more thick that it is, like you don't want to have it too thick to where it looks like it's a fake leaf and that it's like leathery, but you want to have it thick enough to where it creates an inhabitable environment for the actual spores to start sporulating.
Again, everyone, I'm just throwing this out there as I listen to this. This might be a great product for, again, we were talking about preventative. If you know your weather pattern, your weather conditions, you might not want to use it the whole way through, but if you know that, like for me, I know I always get that at the end of September, something's going to come in. So I might, if I have this product, get a small bottle, start it as a foliar spray, maybe 2 weeks into flowering. That's going to ride me through. And also possible if you're growing a longer strain flowering plant like a sativa or something, or a 10-weeker or 12-weeker, and you're farther up north, you might want to use a product like this too, because of weather conditions dropping off sooner. So you might need something like this to kind of help fend off issues. I'm just listening to what you're saying. And just throwing stuff out there. Mike, next, we jump in, brother, and then we'll talk to Johnny and Rob.
No, I would like to add something about the cold weather. Mm-hmm. In my personal experience, when I bring a clone the first time, or I bring a clone to my house and I'm started growing and it's not used to the environment, that run will never do as well. Okay, but when I take a cutting off of that and I put it in my mother's room. The temperature drops about 15 degrees. And I've always thought that was very beneficial. And when I'm just have the room for my vegetarian, for my mother's, since I'm growing outside, I like to keep it at like in 60, 70 with a 5 degree swing on either side. Okay. And I come to a conclusion that is you keep the mothers in that condition. When you cut clones off and you put them back outside, they'll be more resistant to the cold. And I have very, very, very low humidity. So I think my plants just get used to the level of humidity in my house, and they're growing. So
So what you're saying that the plants, if they get used to the temperature fluctuation swing, they're more conducive to handling the problem. But plants that have been in a more consistent environment, if there's a larger swing, they're more likely to have an issue, which would make sense. Just is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening with me. So, when I'm going to take a mother and I want to do clothes for outside, I'm going to put her downstairs where it's cold and where I do have a fluctuation in my temperature, and I give her the right lighting and everything, but I keep it cooler. So the plant for the first couple of weeks that it's there, it may not be doing, I don't get as much vegetation, but up at a certain point, the vegetation starts coming really back and the plant climatizes to that room. And then I cut my clones off of that. And then when that I bring upstairs does even better. And as I can do it 3 times, it's even better, So,
Okay, so
I
you're
think
saying, be realistic to the preparation of your grow for the following season. So if you're going to be going outdoors, you might be having harder weather conditions, don't start them off in the most ideal weather conditions in the beginning. Might give them a little bit of 10-11 care to condition them.
Well, I think they get they registered it in their code, in their genetic code, and where they get to, okay, we've seen this before, we know how to deal with it now, because like mom was already coding, but this is what you would produce. So I think it registers in their growth. I may be off the plate with this one, but
no, you're not. I've always heard it takes one full growing season for seeds to get conditioned to the growing season. And again, I don't know. I go by what people recommend, but it's always made a lot of sense to me. My father's always told me that on different trees, you look on the same species of tree, but they're like different on each side of Monterey County. But anyways, if he was on here, Johnny, and then Rob, we jump in. What do you got, brother?
I just want to say about my plants after they hit the cold, they did have a good sag to them for a couple of days. But then once the temperature got back up, they seemed to jump back up and go to it.
So what do you think the sag was caused by? Abe, do you got any thoughts, or anyone else has any? What do you think the sag is caused by?
I think, I watered them like, I think it was the day before, and then it like got cold that night. So I don't know if it was cold water in the ground, the cold air that went with it, and they were just, I don't know. It wasn't overwatered, that's for sure, because they came right back.
It's the plant's metabolism slowing down.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with the metabolism. Just, when you think of a phosphorus, definitely does not do as well in the cold. That's your energy molecule that actually gives the potassium the ability to open up your stomatal cells. So as a protective mechanism, they close. Those stomates at the bottom of your leaf will actually close to protect themselves from losing, because they're losing all their turgor pressure in that cold. So it's just trying to it's a survival mechanism to go limp, but then as it has its energy, it can come back up, and unless you've actually snapped the cells, if the cells have actually broken because they've become too cold, then it's almost irreversible damage, and you start getting cell death. And then you'll smell that. I mean, that's when your leaves are kind of shot. But
is too cold above freezing?
No, typically
okay.
not. I mean, yeah, it does. For us, it has to go below freezing. Unless it's an incredibly unhealthy plant. But if you're doing the plant health pyramid of John Kempf, then you've got that, or using Power SI, you've got good strong leaf cuticles. So
I appreciate that. Rob, what do you got, brother?
Yeah, no, just with that, I was almost curious too, because this is just getting back to some Harley Smith stuff back in the day. He would talk about taking up additional calcium by adding glutamic acid and glycine, that you could actually fortify the cell with that pectic acid will turn into pectin, and by doing that, the plant itself will be more resistant to the cold. So they've actually said there's been instances where plants will literally go through freezing temps and there'll be no effect to the plant.
Dive into that more, please. I would love to dive into that conversation. Like,
Yeah.
what?
So
anyone knows more about this, please raise your hand. I'd love to just open it up.
So inevitably, what he was saying is that in order to take in additional calcium ions, because there's a lot of people that'll argue that calcium is the health element, if you will. By taking glutamic acid and glycine, you're able to increase the calcium uptake by up to 1,000 times. And by doing that, you're actually causing a chemical reaction in the plant. So the pectin, the normal water that's in the plant starts to develop more pectic acid, and in turn will turn into a pectin. So it's actually a fortifying agent for the plant, because it increases the stickiness, if you will, of the cell walls and so forth. And by not having water in there, the water can't freeze. And if that water can't freeze, it can't freeze and burst the cell and cause damage to the plant. So I don't know if people have or haven't used that.
Av, you want to jump in, and then Hayes?
Yeah.
What did you say you wanted to? It looked like you wanted to say something.
Sorry, yeah, I'm totally agree with that, and that's one of the reasons why we've always recommended using either fish emulsion or fish hydrolysate, because it's going to have that glycine that kind of opens up those calcium channels. You get calcium to come in and definitely give you a stronger cell wall by forming calcium pectate. But it is potassium that's the kind of that health element, and so using something like a kelp extract, when you think you might have some frost or something like that, then definitely having higher levels of kelp in your system, that potassium's what's going to give you more of that buffer. But definitely using something that allows calcium to come into your plant much more readily will give you a harder, strong cell wall.
Hayes, jump in. Appreciate that. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, they broke that down actually pretty well. Like better than I could probably. Yeah, the thing to know about calcium is when your plant is low in calcium, your water retention is higher. So it plays into like what they're talking about. So if you have like low calcium, more water is going to be available in order to freeze, in order to block that metabolism, and from it eventually ends up affecting the actual Brix levels, which ends up affecting the actual flow of those fluids through the plant, which affects that metabolism. And it all plays into the excess of water in there, like they were saying, and how it was able to pretty much freeze up and damage the cells.
Just to simplify everything I'm listening, it just sounds how essential kelp is in the beginning stages of veg, because it helps with calcium uptake. Is that a yes on that? It's just like, if you're going to grow in microbiology, like, did I hear that correctly, or is it pectin or
well, they all bundle into each other. So like one will usually link into another. So it's kind of like what Av was saying with the potassium. Like even if you overdo potassium, it'll make other things knock out, and you'll be deficient in other things like calcium and magnesium and stuff like that. So it's all about like pointing in the right direction and not moving too much in one direction. Just moving slowly.
Av, and then Galaxy 20.
I guess I'm looking at, and that's why I don't know how many people use fish hydrolysate, or that's the reason I use it. I don't use it for the 312 that it offers. I just know that fish hydrolysate will open up calcium channels in the cell membrane or the cell wall. So in your roots, you will uptake more calcium when you have a bit of fish hydrolysate. I actually don't know all the mechanisms and how that works. And because of that, that's why I feel like you are getting more calcium into your plant that way. And then the kelp is definitely important, but I would typically use kelp a little bit later in veg.
Well, you said something on the fish, and I heard that part, and then I heard the kelp, but then I was wondering about the fish too. I was going to ask clarification. So it's really the fish. Dave, can you find a product with the fish hydraulics? Say,
I
Yeah,
use
fish fit.
Neptune's Harvest, but that's out of Maine, I believe.
what is it? What product?
Neptune's Harvest.
Neptune's Harvest. Can you pull that up for us and share your screen, Dave, real quick? And then who else was here? There was someone else that had his hand raised. Galaxy 20.
I do have a little experience using the glutamic acid from the raw catalog, the raw NPK catalog, but focusing on the organics, I'd be curious, the fish hydrolysate, would that also kind of create more imbalances by adding it if I'm trying to fix a calcium problem versus the more direct approach, which would require a different product? Just what are the thoughts on that?
Will you re-say that one more time just for a little bit more, because I thought that was kind of interesting. Galaxy 20. Yeah.
Yes, just I had a little bit of experience using the raw NPK product, the aminos with the glutamic acid, and I believe there's another amino acid in there. And if the fish hydrolysate would be the organic choice to use to address the calcium issue, would that also create more imbalances by affecting other metabolic processes versus the precision of 2 amino acids?
Okay. Anyone want to jump in? Hayes, and then Rob. Anyone has opinion on that?
Yeah, the micros are pretty much where everything starts at. That's where the plant's metabolism is starting at. You need to have all your micronutrients filled out and all those bases covered, so that way you can actually start metabolizing and breaking down and utilizing the actual NPKs and the other macronutrients. When those are out of balance, especially like I was saying, like if you overdo phosphorus or potassium, it can knock those micronutrients out of balance, which then in turn it affects the plant's metabolism, and then your metabolism is off. So it's all about finding. Don't worry about having too many of the micronutrients at that point, because those are almost like precursors, and then that's adding the glutamic acid and all that and the aminos. That's just kind of like throwing. I'm trying to think of an analogy, but it's you're kind of feeding the wrong thing at the wrong time. Like the plant needs to be able to metabolize first before you can start giving it the proteins and the aminos to start building the proteins, to start building its actual cell structure to keep growing. So don't ever worry about adding too many of those micros. I mean, there is too much that you can use, but I wouldn't worry about throwing in additives like that. Those are only going to help you. It's going to help the plant metabolism.
Hey guys, you guys want to change change up the topic? We've been talking about microbiology and nutrients. I think a lot of good stuff came of it to kind of strategize for next season. Hayes, do you have another topic? Was Adam, did I see your hand go up? I'm always open to talking about other conversations in this industry, because it's not just about growing. Chlorine deficiency. Okay.
In plants, yes.
Drops the balance, that gets rid of it. Just throwing that out there.
Oh, no. I'm saying everyone talks about how chlorine is bad, but there's actually a utilization that the plant has for it. So a lot of people who are using RO systems and who are trying to cut that out of their, it's not as big in soil, but people who are in container growing and who do like drain to waste or like actually do runoff, it can happen in soil as well too. It's just depending on your medium, but chlorine deficiency has been popping up a lot lately, and it's just been noticed by the plant community like just in the past 2 years. And it's a lot similar to it's very similar to like other things that we see.
And plants
Exactly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, and just throwing this out there, are plants taking up the chlorine that we're using in in water to void of bioenergy, or is it a different type of chlorine that plants are utilizing? And I'm just throwing that out there. Is there different charges or anything along those lines? I don't know.
Well, there's different kinds of chlorines and chloramines, and like chloramine is different. But the main problem is there's no real happy medium. So people's faucet water will have an excess of chlorine in it because they don't want to have mold growing in the pipes or any type of bacterial growth in the pipes. So as it's coming through your faucet, most faucets have those little screens to catch sediment, but it's also to add aeration to that water to get the excess chlorine out. But still, if you were to test your chlorine in your water, you probably have an excess amount in there. But naturally in soil, there's a trace amount, like it's literally like a trace mineral that you would have in that soil. That's the chlorine that the plant actually utilizes. And if it doesn't have it, it'll start drying out its bottom leaves. It'll start necrosis on itself. So
does anyone
something
know
to look out for?
Does anyone know sorry to interrupt you, Hayes. Does anyone know the mineral specifically that chlorine is attached to in the soil, the rock of? Do you know that?
It's usually sodium chloride, right?
Yeah.
So it's just natural table salt, rock salt, and then.
But you don't want to use.
Yeah, you don't want to use that. You never want to just. I mean, you can get
it's like salting your earth. Yeah.
So it's interesting because I'm trying to help this company called Grow Water get registered as a foliar nutrient. And their product's a hypochlorous acid, right? So that hypochlorous acid does work as a bit of a sanitizer. It can, keep PM away, but they can't register it as a pesticide until they've done a lot of research. So, but if we can get growers to use it as a foliar nutrient, as Hayes was kind of alluding to.
Did you did you drop off? Until he comes back, Johnny, jump on, and then if Av comes back, we'll let him finish his thought. I think he lost internet signal.
This weekend I live in Virginia, and they had
Av, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry about that.
It dropped off. Do you want to finish your thought before we jump on, Johnny?
It was a product called Grow Wash.
And you said it uses some type of chlorine or chlorinide to help sanitize the product, the plants for PM.
Yeah, it was. It is hypochlorous acid, HOCl, and I think I think I've seen it in it was a Canada Cribs video or something like that. Some people use Kangen water, and they'll use kosher salt and go through a Kangen machine to produce hypochlorous acid.
And what's the residual on the plant after sprayed on it? Is there a residual, or what does it convert into?
I mean, it's hypochlorous, so it's just hydrogen, oxygen, and chlorine. So there's you don't see a residue on it. People have used it as a bit of a nice cleanse for clones. They get increased clone uptake. Of course, cloning, sanitation is so important in cloning. Yeah, anyone use it? Anyone use any hypochlorous acid? No. The product in Canada is called Grow Water. I think Athena Cleanse is hypochlorous acid.
There's 3% chlorine in Down to Earth's Langminite. I do know that.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Johnny, what do you got for us, brother?
This weekend I was in Virginia. I had con and checked it out, and there's some products that I picked up that they gave for free. I just thought it was different, but they were all Omri products. One of them was an insecticide called Pure Crop One. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of that a little bit. Do they use corn oil?
Corn and soybean.
Corn and soybean. Okay. So it's a supplicant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she says it does, but it more soaks into their body and works at their internals, kills them internally, or it suffocates them. And she said that it's water soluble, and it was really weird that how two oils can be water soluble. And
Yeah, it sounds like bullshit, right?
yeah. And I mean, I got, I just had to, I took a sample just to see, and, and it just, after I got back into the truck, I was talking to my brother about it. And I'm just like, man, that's just not right. Oils are not water soluble. They will eventually, I mean, you can eventually dilute it some, but it's not soluble like that. What do you think?
Yeah.
The
But
old saying, oil and water don't mix.
But it's
Exactly. Yeah.
it's much like THC oil, and they get these water soluble THC. I think they micronize it and they cover it with a polymer coating, and so that's what they call as water soluble, right? So it's got like a
Something like a
There's a soap in it. There.
Yeah.
So I guess that
Probably sodium lauryl sulfate. Probably.
maybe
optic foliar.
No,
Foliar
please.
has a
Optic foliar.
Yeah, they have a product called Transport, and it's like a leaf not surfactant. Yeah, but it helps it soak into the leaf without any actual residue being left on, and you don't have to spray the actual bottom parts of the leaves. You just have to spray the tops, and it actually penetrates the mesophilic layer. And what they do is they use like a polymer similar to like a soap that's able to actually break it down from its actual form and is able to have it do its thing on the leaf.
Rob, let's go and jump on next. Hayes, I always appreciate your viewpoints. And then just throwing this out there, guys, the most important thing, and I'm just so proud of you, brother, was that Johnny, was that you interpreted something. Perception. Whether is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. We're not the scientists. We're not the biologists. But you're the grower, and you have a moment there to be conscious of your decision before putting something on your plant. And I just want to be proud of you, man, because as you develop your skills, develop your growing, gardening, expand, everything you put on your plants, I think do matter. And as you spend your money, we're going to build up certain brands that have ethics, and we're going to shut down other brands. And man, we have 20 participants on this call right now, so that's 20 Zoom. That's really cool. Rob, do you want to jump on, brother?
Yeah, I just had a question too with that oil, because I've done cooking for a long time. In addition to using that micronization, a lot of times they'll use some type of an emulsifier. So whether it be a sunflower lecithin or another style of lecithin, but these things will actually allow the water to kind of encapsulate and make it, it'll keep it in suspension. Another way, really interesting too, if you want to solubilize things, and I've seen this and it kind of blew my mind, if you put oil and water in a vacuum and actually stir it, and you deoxygenate the water, it'll hold it in suspension for a longer period of time than it will just naturally. It's like, just thought that was interesting with the surfactant properties. Or with the, I thought that was interesting with the properties to be able to emulsify like water and the oil. So as he was talking about like the micronization, there are actual emulsifiers, so that when you mix the two together, it stays in suspension, and then it stays there. I use it for cooking.
So what does it mean? So when we use words like stays in suspension, and I'm not trying to be critical here, but I am asking, is that marketing? Are these words?
No, not at all.
Or is it like, what does it mean when it says stays in solution? Like, or does it completely mix, or does it dilute into it, or does it is it a molecule separate from another molecule?
So it just allows it, and I would have to get more into the physics of it, and but it just allows the two. So typically those two things aren't going to combine. If you typically are going to take water and oil, one is going to separate, the oil is going to raise to the top, and it's just going to sit, and you can mix it, even like like a dressing, you can mix and shake, and eventually the two layers are going to give. But I know for 100%, you can take like a sunflower lecithin or a soy lecithin. When you add that and you start mixing it, it will actually, like to say it stays in suspension. The oil and water at no point is going to separate. Those two things are bonded and they're there to stay. You can do, like I said, with a vacuum pump and a stir thing. You can watch a science thing. It freaked me out a little bit, but you remove all that oxygen, and shockingly too, without even an emulsifier, those things will stay in suspension. Using the micronizer is kind of a homogenizing type of a machine. You can also use that emulsifier to make sure it stays suspended, but those little nanoparticles a lot of times will stay longer in the water as opposed to something that would naturally just separate out.
Well,
Interesting.
that doesn't
The
mean
edible
that it
industry as
actually
well.
dilutes. That doesn't mean it dilutes, right? It means
No.
that the oil holds in the water. It doesn't.
Yeah, if you take water, like, I mean, it's a neat thing to look up. But if you just get like a little lecithin, some water and some oil, and you mix it, it will, the water is going to turn like a golden color. It's just going to become a homogeneous, evenly distributed mixture. Whereas if you didn't have that in there, basically that little however much
So
oil
it
you have,
becomes
it's
water
just around.
soluble at that point. So it is
It's-
what. So can
bonds.
it evaporate?
It
Can it
bonds.
evaporate away, or
Oh,
how does it?
It breaks down the structure so that way they're both being able to become one pretty much. So it's
Sure.
they use it in the medical in the cannabis industry for the medibles.
Absolutely.
What are the
We
medibles?
started
Yeah, edibles.
Edibles.
just edibles.
Sorry.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
I used to white label for companies back in like 2011, 2012, and we ranked it like the highest, whatever it was, the highest percentage of the extraction rate that they did or whatever. And it was like 12 years ago. And what we used was an emulsifier like that, so sunflower lecithin. And what it does is it allows it to absorb into your body quicker, and it lasts for longer as well. And you have to use less. It just allows it.
So
to,
the plant will actually process the chemical and metabolize it.
Yeah, because your body doesn't burn fat first; it burns carbs. So when you're able to emulsify and stuff like that, your body metabolizes it differently, and you're able to absorb it quicker.
After it metabolizes, does anyone know what happens to the chemical?
Form changes.
It goes through your liver and it turns into a delta hydroxy.
No, I mean in the plant exactly. Does anyone know where it gets stored, or if it does get stored, or if it does just get processed out into, and I'm just wondering. This is just where we dig. I have no idea. We can stop the conversation, move on to another topic at any point.
What was the question, sir?
Do you know like the half-life of these products? Like, do you know like when we say that the plant metabolizes it, like how fast does it metabolize it, or do you know anything about like where it's stored?
Most time frames they give you are a week to 2 weeks at the most, because then at that point you're worried more about bacterial growth.
All right, so just if you're going to use a product like this, try to make sure to be at least 3 weeks from harvest to be absolutely safe. I guess that's maybe where I'm digging.
Continue to sniff it and don't like let too much light hit it, because that's when bacteria will start growing.
All right, guys. Any other topics, problems arising? I know a friend of mine. He reached out to me. A lot of people, actually, I stay away from this side of the industry, but a lot of people have reached out saying, "Hey, market's flooded, market's dumping out. Getting pretty low. Like, what do they do?" That's what a lot of people have been asking me. Like, what do they do with inventory? Do you guys want to dive into these topics, the conversations? What do they suggest on obviously running toward regulation? But for me, it's all about ground game. Find someone until they need it, stay in front of them, and then wait till a sell comes up at this time of the year. Any other suggestions on that? Mike?
Well, me personally, I got the chance to sell to an extraction company and I liquidated because it was the best thing for me. I didn't buy the right strain. I wasn't hitting the numbers that I was doing. And then when I factored in the work and the risk of waiting that the market straightens out or something, and there's another thing that I have to keep in factor, that my product, the THC dries out, so I have less and less as I wait to process. So that factors in my decision to liquidate to the wholesaler, even as I didn't hit the numbers that I was looking for.
Guys, this is not just this industry. This is produce. This is all industries. It's, you know, when you're growing a perishable item, and the next step after growing that perishable item, only a certain percentage of that actually goes to the market fresh. The rest of it is diced, sliced, juiced, canned, refrigerated, dehydrated, mixed in with other products just to be sold to the end consumer, and they actually get rid of their inventory. So being strategic, being willing to do things other people aren't willing to do, those are also really great suggestions. You know, we're not going to stay on this topic too long, but I think it is important to be aware that these products are perishable. You know, if you can't get rid of it in the state it is, you have to think about conservation or transforming it into other forms, and, you know, creating a more desirable product. Full Sun, do you got anything, brother?
Conservation side of this, I have
Go.
seen raising grove bags. I'm curious, are these grove bags worth the money?
The grow bags, you're talking about the ones where they, the plastic ones where they put they ship you,
Yeah,
huh?
you don't have to burp them. Once you've dried, you throw them in there, you vacuum seal them, and it's a done deal. You open them up when you're ready to consume the product, and they're good for however long.
It's what I do with my Marlar bags after I after I stabilize the inventory, the environment or the product, and it's at that, you know, that good state I'm looking for. I throw it in the Mylar bags. I throw in a two-way humidifier, so it's pulling moisture or giving moisture back, and I seal it up for a few months, you know, and I take it, open it up, take whatever I need out, and put it back. So in my opinion, if they're anything like Mylar bags, they work. I've never used them.
Everybody that I have seen online using them swears by them now. I just didn't know if any of you had used them and had any hands-on experience.
I've had a number of people suggest them, you know, but I'm a big on the Mylar bag because it reflects light, and it's not plastic, because I'm always concerned about, if you know, you shouldn't put it in an environment where heat or sweat's going to happen, but you know, plastic, you know, getting into my flowers. So I'm always thinking about Mylar versus other stuff, but they have Mylar here, I think, too, right? Anyone use these on the,
if you guys look at the screen, and I think it's more, they also have what they call their terpene lock, which is supposed to help with the diminishing of terpenes. So you can see here, they're talking about the different makeups for these bags, like odor, oxygen, anti-static, humidity, UV. And then they also have them for, you know, tub liners. And then there's their traditional smaller bags.
Not to go biblical with you guys, but what's that story in the Bible, right, where the king gives 5 servants an X amount of gold, and one guy buries it, the other guy loses it, the other guy invests in something. What you know, you got to kind of, I always think about that, right? You know, when you have something in your hand, you know, there's a process of storing it. You know, is that your best strategy? You know, until you know, do you sit on it too long? If you don't store it properly, it's going to go to mold. You really need to know what you're doing a little bit, you know, and also I would highly suggest you check it every couple months. And then we talk about the transformation of the product, you know, liquidating it to oil, infusing it into edibles, going to vape cartridges, and the variety of other products that are coming onto the marketplace right now. Adam.
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to say as well, when you're taking the time, like you had mentioned, to make sure the product is looked after and just taken care for, like you really care about where your end product is. I notice people they'll like it, because when they consume it, they get the effects, and you know, it's there for them, you know. So I think just having good quality is always a good factor. You know, just like you had mentioned numerous times, just, you know, you want to take care of your product, and not just, you know, just not take care of it. You want to make sure the end product is good.
Appreciate that, brother. Any other stuff coming up this season? I don't problems, suggestions, things you guys want to share. I don't want to take up your guys' time too much this evening, but I also want to once again share the information that we do learn. I think everyone's progressing actually really well on the channel. Like it's pretty crazy every time we check back in.
The
Johnny?
problem, Mark, is we're doing such a good job. People are running out of problems.
I was telling Mike actually. I was telling Mike the other day, I was like, bro, we got like maybe 2 more Sundays before this shit gets boring, man. Like no one's going to want to hear about anything. So we just look forward to things all changing up in the next couple weeks. We're going to constantly try to keep evolving this content. So it's just not one thing. Johnny, you want to jump in, and then Hayes, and then we'll go to Rob.
Yeah, I had I don't know it. I forgot what you called it, but when your soil or my cocoa doesn't take water fast enough, and
surface tension.
There you go, and it needs a wetting agent. So what I know you can use aloe and I forget what that other prickly plant is. So if you're using aloe, and how much aloe do you put in there per gallon of water? And how do you prepare the aloe to go in there? Do you grind it up? Do you squish it? I don't know. I just wanted to try and do something. I've only heard of it, and nobody ever talks about how much to use. They just talk about.
I agree with you. I've heard that too. The aloe. I was like, I would like to incorporate that too. I've seen that. So that's a great question. I think.
Please. I use sticks, so I'm old school.
What's a stick?
I just kind of, if there's surface tension, I just put a stick into the ground, not too far deep, let the water travel down real slowly, and it breaks surface tension. And then I'm slowly rehydrating the soil back until the surface tension is broken up from the center out, but the aloe and surfactants and things like that, like yucca as well, I think if you got it on the shelf and it's a hot day, and it's drying your plants out real quickly, I think, but I have heard that they wash out of your soil fairly quickly. I don't know about the aloe. Anyone have any thoughts around that? Like you guys were saying?
Well, what I do is for that is I put in live worms, and they go up and down and they mucase and they do their thing, and it helps keep my soil well watered. And now it sure as you're in a heat wave, it's not going to help you, but say in other situations it will.
Thanks for staying humble. I love that. Just bring your soil back to life. That's the best way. Rob, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was actually gonna ask something, and I don't know if it's a thing to ask, but you talked about getting interesting. I started studying this week about ox and redox, and this guy from France named Olivier, who I'm gonna get his name wrong, I apologize. Olivier Hosson, I believe is the name, was talking about this is going to be the future of gardening in terms of he was showing solubility shifts. This kind of blew me away, where if your pH could be a certain level, but the EH could actually make your pH be a degree different. So there are certain times where something would appear that it would be soluble, at the particular pH, but because the EH is off, which is measured in millivolts, and then they have this way of dividing it by 59 to get this logarithmic scale you'll see, oh my God, it's actually not soluble. And I'm just starting to kind of take this in. I was like, I don't know.
Can you dive into this? Explain this more. What was that other thing you said? I'd never heard of that before. Well, you said the EA?
The EH, yeah, EH. So what they were talking forever, they said,
what is the EH? What does that stand for?
So EH is your potential electrons. So pH is usually your potential hydrogen. With this, it's a little different, but the difference is if you donate, like if something that has more electrons is considered reducing, and something that loses electrons is considered oxidating, and these different things. So he he showed how the two interplay with one another. Each one is worthless by itself, is kind of how he described it, but together they're crucial for plant health.
Send me a link. Will you send me a link or video on this? I'd love to I'm gonna try and get in contact with that dude. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
To just right, we can all jump in and have a conversation with him.
Yeah, he's with John Kemp on that Kind Harvest, I believe it is, or something. I'll pull
That's
it up.
interesting. That's cool. Hayes, what do you got for us, brother? Thanks, Rob. Always appreciate you, man.
Oh, man.
Rob, I want to hear a joke at the end of this. We're gonna wrap this up
All
with
right.
the joke, so you better be prepared for that.
I'll give you the vodka joke, man.
Okay, cool. Hayes, what do you got for us, brother?
Oh, sorry. I just two things. I just wanted to read the rest of that chlorine thing. My computer wasn't loading. So the whole thing about like why your plant needs chlorine is, it says chlorine is implicated in several physiological plant functions, such as in osmotic and somatal regulation, in oxygen evolution and photosynthesis, disease resistance and tolerance, as well as in fruit quality and crop yields. Recent publications it's referred to as the critical CL deficiency concentrations. Oh, it just goes into measurements. But that's pretty much what all the the plant utilizes chlorine for. And if you don't have that, then even at its trace amounts, then your physiological functions are going to be pretty much hindered, and your osmotic pressure is going to be down. Your stomatal, the stomata aren't going to be able to regulate themselves to be able to actually open and dilate to actually breathe. So it really does have a whole lot of functions in the plant that we shouldn't just cast aside. So it's just good to remember that. And then,
is there parts per billion or parts per million that overall is recommended? Because that's very interesting around the minimum law of tolerance. It's like how little.
Yeah, their measurement right here is very weird, so I'll have to get deeper into that. I know it's very minuscule amount. Like that's what I was saying. There's too much in our water for it to be. It's almost overly beneficial to where it's just over fertilizing it with that certain nutrient. But it is just one thing, because I have some plants that are showing that right now, because I'm using dehu water, and there's zero chlorine in what I'm using. So that's just what I saw popping up, and just wanted to let that go out there for other people that might be seeing this, and it is possible to happen in your bag soils.
It's important to understand everything's connected. Mike, what do you got, brother?
Okay, guys, I want to mention a few interesting stuff that I saw on the page this week on the telemark. Do a little bit, talk about some stuff. There's one of our members that posted a bonsai plant. I don't know if any of you guys saw that. It was taking a cannabis plant and growing it as a bonsai in a very small pot. And I thought, and it was in flower. It was the coolest thing.
Dave, can you find that picture?
I seen that. That was totally cool.
Wasn't that totally cool?
It was awesome. I was like, that is so awesome.
Fuck, that would be the perfect thing to have on your desk, or if this.
Yeah,
like
that was art right there. It was art, man. It was really
can you
cool.
imagine the work it takes to do that? So if somebody can make a bonsai like that, right? And then if you can get that to go, well, hell, the regular plants you're a joke, if you can master this. I'm thinking. I don't know, guys. I just thought that. Does anybody else? Is anybody hasn't had a chance to jump up there? Please come on up. Don't be shy, guys.
If you're up here, please jump in there. Glenn, Gemmery.
That's it.
I apologize, JK. Oh, that's interesting. That's funny.
No.
Making a little art.
So basically, I got to learn how to do this. Abe, do you have any knowledge on? Av, do you have any knowledge on this?
Yeah, it's always important. Like it's no different than how you would bonsai other trees. You are constantly bonsaiing both the roots and the shoots, right? So it's constant repotting, where you're trimming the roots and you're trimming the tops.
But is the plant keep going? Is the plant still just continuously flowering?
It's like super cropping out of a cup.
But no, you harvest it one time and you're done, like
Yeah.
everything else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I have
okay.
no idea.
It's not in- You can bonsai a mother plant, but you just have to be very careful with your nutrients. Otherwise, you will trigger pre-flowering, and then you'll have to go and veg it back. I mean, the hardest thing about, in my opinion, bonsaiing is to try to keep it at multiple leaves when you're trying to bonsai a mother. Is that eventually you start, it starts throwing out 3 leaves, then 1 leaf, and then you're fucked.
So many people.
Well, then you're starting over, and it's a whole new experience, right? You
Might
take
as
a
well
picture,
flower it.
yeah, you go at it. But guys, I'm sorry to cut in for that, but I just thought that was fucking I thought that was very interesting comment and a great little nugget. That's something my friend Ken would get into, being so precise. You always got to be dedicated, and I can just imagine the time it must take to do a small thing like that. It looks really cool, but it's not easy. I don't think it'll be easy to do, but I think I'm going to give it a shot.
Just try it with your seedlings.
Actually,
So you get like a.
It's very easy to do. You take that autoflower and you stunt the shit out of it, and then it won't go nowhere. And there you go. I've done it. I've done it on accident, but I've done it.
I think I'm doing it now, my friend. I may be
You can
already
do it with the
starting
big
my
one
first
even.
fucking bonsais.
Yep, just stunt the shit out of it. That's all it takes. And then
Yeah.
it don't go nowhere.
Story of my life. But anyway, so no, just the one article I saw that was pretty cool. So,
Anything else on the forum that happened at all that we want to share? Again, this is here to share. This is here to, again, be a community, show up, honor my promise to you guys to try to just, stay in touch and so on a weekly basis.
well, there was one other thing that I found curious. I don't know, is it true? One of the members were talking about getting a female plant to go and produce seeds by spraying some kind of fucking paint or something on his leaves. Is that all BS, or is there any truth behind that? Can you actually get a female to go boy girl on you to produce seeds or
Yes.
something?
Yes, I've done it.
Silver thiol
Or-
sulfate is one of them, and then there's a few different things you can spray on them.
Kaleido silver.
Silver. Yeah.
And does that stay on the plant after when it comes to, because you're just picking up the seeds, so you don't give it whatever, right?
I think those create
Basically-
feminized seed. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole plant turns into a hermia and it just produces a bunch of seeds.
And if I remember straight, isn't there a certain amount of time you have to wait before you can harvest the product off those seeds? Is that correct or incorrect? I've heard this. Does anyone know about that? I've heard that once. Rob, can you jump in? Do you got anything with me?
I mean, I just know about silver nitrating plants to make them herm. And usually when you make them herm, it'll actually cause them to produce a feminized seed. That was kind of like one of the things that some growers use. There's also, and I'm spasming on it, there's another silver product though that people are using to herm the plant specifically. There's a lot of growers that do that at the end of the season in order to get their plants for the next year, because they'll typically be feminized.
Silver thiol sulfate, I think it's called, is another one they use.
I think that might be it.
So it is a
And-
good
and
practice.
what they actually do is
Dave, can you pull that up? Civil thiol.
It can help. It can make you produce.
it
can make you produce herm
They
seeds.
don't get the seeds from the herm plant. They then
No.
use that herm plant to pollinate another plant, one that has.
They usually inbreed.
Yeah, like its sister or something.
That's again, you're kind of leading into what I've kind of heard there, where they have to wait one generation after they take that seed. They, like you said, they do something else with it, and then after that, then they finally have product that they can actually use or sell in the market or whatever.
And that's how you make feminized seeds.
God,
You
I wish
take
I
You
knew
wanna
more
do-
about
you wanna
this.
do-
It doesn't have the male
Herm
chromosome.
You need to do it with a strong genetic though, otherwise you will produce Hermes seeds. Like they'll still say that it can feminize, but you'll still get like you'll still get a few that will firm out on you and can ruin your entire harvest. So that's why they do like an inbreed. So they'll do that, and then they'll inbreed them, and then they'll be able to influence the female traits within those actual plants. But if you're not doing it with a good genetic at first, like these breeders are, you can screw yourself over.
Interesting.
We're gonna, Mike, I think, Mike, we're still venting the coming, but I think we're gonna be bringing on a seed producer of Mike's in the next week or two, just talk about their process. That's one of the things we're kind of committed to doing on this channel, is venting, products, seeds, manufacturers, just everything in general, like actually have some level of venting and morality process, and starting with them, just starting with the conversation. So I'm actually looking forward to that conversation and seeing the level of knowledge this gentleman has, because Mike's been pretty excited about it.
It makes me scary though, putting on like a paint on your plant. Would be any chemicals transferred over to those seeds? Because me, in my personal experience, I had one plant that went Hermy on me in a room, and we processed the material anyway. And when I threw away my biomass, I got a plant out of it, and it grew like in front of the house. Everybody that knows me saw that, and it didn't hurt. Those plants didn't herm out, so they stayed female. So does that wasn't done by any paint? That was done because out of water stress and heat stress, the plant turned on me, or turned on the breeder. Actually, I didn't do it myself personally.
Rob, jumping over to you real fast and throwing this thought out there, is these types of products even necessary in our industry anymore because of the access to plants and the access to more stable genetics? Should some of these products be just let go in a sense? Do they still have a necessity in our industry? Rob, go ahead and jump in, brother.
Yeah, I apologize if we're gonna talk about the Herman or stuff. I apologize, but that's a shit the bed on my part. I left my hand up.
Well, what were you going to jump in?
Now, the only other weird thing, but it's actually kind of not related. I had a really bananas thing that I'd seen this week about reflectivity of a new paint that they're using with like it's almost like a 98, almost 99% reflectivity. But that's kind of an off thing. I do apologize.
On products.
Hey, no, that's pretty interesting, because somebody's growing in a room that could be helpful. But now with the new Mylar tents, the quality, even on the cheap tents, the quality of the reflectability in the tents are incredible these days. That's one thing I came to realize with my budget tent.
Adam, what do you got for us, brother?
Oh yeah, it was actually had to do with Bacon just mentioned right now, tent. Because I'm my grow seasons are a little long between each other, so I want to maybe have a grow between. So I've been looking into tents, and because of the space, I was looking like at a 2x4. Just because I only want to do I only want to do 1 or 2 plants. Just something to just keep me in the process, kind of keep a grow going, and I think that would be cool, just to throw pictures out like, hey, this is the way the grow's going and whatnot. But I don't know, like a 2x4 tent, is that doable? Is that something that someone of you guys or anybody here is using, or is that something that you would use?
Jason, go ahead and jump in on this, brother, please. He's killing it right now. We're right about to release a whole thing on 3 pounds per plant, all on Jason's grows. So, and then Av, will you please jump in after that?
I'd definitely say 2x4 will work for 2 plants. The taller, the better.
I'm releasing
awesome.
all of his pictures, we're releasing a year worth of content and pictures on the next 10 videos of him upgrading from less expensive lights to the Cadillac lights, and we're adjusting his so in the next grow we're going to be implementing on the 4th grow CO2, because I think these lights are so much more, they actually need at this point need supplemental CO2, and we're going to see a difference in the plants. So I'm really looking forward to Jason's thing at the release of these videos. I think the first one gets released on Monday or Tuesday. Av, jump in, please.
Oh, sorry, I'm jumping back to both either the feminizing of seeds or the breeding techniques of using. You can use sodium thiosulfate to collect male pollen from female cannabis plants, and then you can use silver thiosulfate to actually do the feminization. So
it's a two-part.
Yeah, two different products, and they I think they're very common in the industry. I think colloidal silver is becoming less and less popular. I think it's because it can be toxic.
Yeah, you have to use more of it too.
Oh, do you? Okay.
I believe you have to treat the plant more with it.
Right. It almost does turn the plant almost blue. We did that for our first run. We bought a colloidal silver generator off of Amazon, and that's how we created our first set of feminized seeds. But now we've gone to the STS, whether it's trying to create male pollen, especially if we're trying to do a back cross, or we'll use silver thiosulfate for feminization.
In what life application would you want to do that? Is that to save genetics or go back, and why is that?
I mean, part of it is we're also trying to create autos. We've got a strong autoflower industry in parts of our climate, so we're trying to create feminized autos, and then it would just be for good seed production. In terms of if you've got a particular genetic and you only want it to get the genes, the male genes, and you want that male pollen, then you can use that to ensure that you're not getting any of the female genetics.
So then you take the male pollen and then pollinate the autos, and then now you have auto seeds.
No, sorry. This would be if you're trying to maintain male genetics and you want to bring only the male genetics into a cross that you already have. Then you would use just male pollen that way, and you generated that male pollen from the female.
Would you ever feel comfortable doing a presentation on this ever on our channel?
No, but I would highly recommend. We've got whether it's someone like Kevin Jodry or Stephen Tan, any of those folks, I think would do a great job. I mean, any good seed breeder, that's technique.
I'm gonna get with you. We'll hopefully do a really nice presentation with you and a couple of the other content creators on the channel and see what comes of it. That'd be really cool.
And sorry, I reached out to Hayes on the chat. I was wondering if he could share his reference to the chlorine. I thought that was pretty interesting. Whatever he was reading about the impacts of the importance of chlorine in plant production. If he could share that in the chat, that'd be great. Thanks.
I am on my phone right now, so it's hard for me to. Oh. Every time that I try to do something on here, it'll like knock me off. So
sorry.
It's okay. I can send it to you later, though.
Yeah, by all means, I'll just share my email in the chat if that helps.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to ask about the seeds. How long did it take to stabilize them? Because, I heard that it takes a while to stabilize them, but I haven't done that before. So I was just curious to ask you on how long did that take for the stabilization of that certain seed?
And by stabilization, do you mean characteristics or feminization?
No, by characteristics, and like knowing that you're going to get this product or this type of this, you're looking for this type of terpene or phenotype.
You have to run a whole line. You have to completely do a whole breeding line.
We did, yeah, and then we back crossed it with the male 3 times.
Yeah, because I know it goes pretty. I know, in certain seed growers where that I'd listened to, had mentioned that it took a while to stabilize the seed, but I'm not that deep into it, so I'm just by no means am I an expert in that area, so that's why I'm asking.
What they do is they inbreed. So they'll take the winners of the first bracket, and then they'll have the offspring of those, and then they'll find the winners of those, and then they'll mate those together. So they're pretty much inbreeding, and what that inbreeding does is it unlocks like potential for different types of characteristics to come out. And then when they find one that has certain characteristics from that actual inbreeding, it's kind of like a deformity. When they find that type of deformity that they like, whether it be like swollen calyxes or like literally the type of structure that they like, then they'll try to hone in on that, and then that's what they try to instill that into the strong genetics, so that way the deformity comes out, but the other parts of it are left behind, so they're able to incorporate two different areas. When you look at the bracket system, it's like a tournament, like with how they choose their
And like it's like the finalists, that whatever the final one is, that's going to be your final cut to cross with something else. Is that how that?
Yeah, the entire time they're doing a pheno hunt, and they're picking out the best ones, and then they're also inbreeding, and then the whole inbreeding is where they get the whole different deformity characteristics. So like that's how you get that's why you see on some breeders why they just have a different type of calyx on their butt.
So just to ask real quick for clarity of, you went all the way through this process, then you went 3 back, so you went a total of 10. Does that make sense? You went through this entire process and then you cross back 3 to make
some people sell them. Some people will sell them at different stages. So people will sell them as like F1s, F2s, and that just indicates how far along their breeding process that they're at and how finalized of a product.
Yeah, sorry,
where do you
we would have sold at F3.
You sold it at F3, and that's
F3
stable enough.
It was for us.
Oh, got it. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, but honestly, I think going to 7 generations is ideal.
Very interesting. What would you say this industry normally takes their seeds to before they sell them off to the rest of the marketplace for growing? Like professional seed producers right now, do they how legitimate do they do on crossing their seeds and like stabilizing their genetics before selling them to other people?
It mainly has to do with your intention for the seed, whether you want to actually breed for it yourself and hunt, or if you just want to have something out the gate that is what you know is like on the end product, like what's on the picture itself. Like that's when like a F7, like that's all the way in the end of the breeding line. That's when you know like that's what's in the picture. When you get stuff like F1s, F2s, you're still getting all these different genetic variations from whether they inbred with it or whatever. So you're still able to find your unicorn if you want to go down that explanation. So it's more of you phenotyping for like they have more than likely found their characteristics that they like, but you still are able to find characteristics that you like as well that they probably haven't came across. It's just
Mike, jump in, brother.
I think I've been far down enough on the eugenics thing on the seeds. I have a new question for the whole group. What do you think using a CO2 generator out of the bags? Do you need to have like a really high photon count in your room for it to be beneficial, or somebody that's only pushing like 700 to 800 photons? Will he get benefit from CO2? Because I was thinking about that when you mentioned it with Jason as Crow. So that's
I believe the recommendation is your PPFD should be at 1,000 or higher. So if you're at 700 or 800 par reading, you don't need CO2. You can run your par rating all the way up to 1,000, and you shouldn't need CO2. I'm not saying it won't be beneficial, but over 1,000 and over is where you're going to need CO2. Otherwise, your plants will not be able to use all that photons.
What was the light? What was your grow doing this grow? Do you know any of that information yet?
What was it doing? What was my PPFD?
Like the photons, yeah, like yeah. What was all that information?
I,
Do you
I
know any of
kept
it?
it under 1,000, but it was up there. It was in the 900s at the tallest part of the plant. So the lower part of the canopy was around 600-700.
So if we do increase that CO2, okay, so for the mushroom bags don't release a lot of CO2. They only are good for grow tents, in my opinion. You know, like if you go beyond grow tents in a grow room, I don't think there's really any, and I would please prove me, you know, suggest something at this point. I don't think there is really any good product from like additional CO2, like after beyond a tent, you know, like CO2 generators, all that stuff. I think they're just like too efficient, because I remember for our mushroom farm, 10,000 square feet, we had one CO2 generator and an efficient blow system, and our CO2 is staying pretty efficient between 11 and 1,500 parts per million, 11 and 1,500 parts per million, and that was a water cooled CO2 generator, and that was for 10,000 square feet. You know, so I don't think there's a really good efficient product out there for supplemental CO2. Tanks are heavy, they deplete quickly unless you're, you know, and the CO2 bags, I think they are efficient, but really for only small grow tents that are closed and you have a semi-closed environment. Is there any products on the market that are Adam, please jump in. Anyone jump in on that. And then Dave, also you find out a little bit also about CO2, and too much CO2 was not beneficial. And then we'll jump over to Av as well. So we'll go Adam, Dave, and then
Yes,
Av.
sir. All right. So I also know that on a CO2 system where you are releasing CO2, that your enclosure needs to be super. It needs to be tight. You know, it has to be. It can't have like too much leaks in it, or else you won't really reap the benefits of the CO2. It has to be a sealed environment. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Completely agree with you. And then who? Av, do you want to jump in, or was it Dave? I can't remember.
It was Dave.
Oh, Dave, jump in, share what you, and then I'd love to hear, you know, Av's your input on this one too.
Yeah. So most recently, I was watching a webinar with John Kempf, and they were doing experiments outside, and I forget what crop it was, but it's on a pretty big scale, like 100 by 100 area, and they're introducing more CO2, so they're letting the CO2 come down on the plants, and their studies is showing that too much CO2 falling down on an uncovered soil is actually killing off certain bacteria, microbial life. And that's when I was talking to you the other day, because I'm like, man, think about like most of our grow tents, 4x4, 5x8, whatever. And some people, you know, they put in four of these mushroom bags, or they might have a CO2 tank. And most of our soils, you know, most people don't do cover crops in their indoors. Are we having an adverse effect by causing the killing off of these microbial lives? I want to look into it a lot more. It just really struck me that soil biologists were conducting these tests outside, and then they were bringing seedlings into like almost like a controlled chamber. And the one with just normal atmospheric CO2, after the seedling had its taproot, it was showing the bacterial colonies forming around it. They had some type of dye or something to show that. And then the ones that had a little bit elevated, and these amounts was like 0.004 was okay, and then up to 0.006, that increase in CO2, those seedlings were not developing properly, and it didn't have the bacteria already around the taproot. So it was actually killing off and being less productive in that case.
Av, you want to jump in, add any viewpoints, considerations, or thought process to this?
Oh yeah, and I think that's one of the differences, of course, outdoors versus indoor environment. Unless you're growing in a tent and growing on the ground, the majority of your CO2 will eventually get to the lower portions of your um, in a grow room. Of course, if you're on benches, the CO2 will fall. So you won't have as high of a concentration. CO2 will, of course, kill bacteria or definitely slow down a lot of microbes and productivity and stuff. So we do have to be careful about having excessive CO2 levels. I was interested by Jason's comment because I've read that anything when you go beyond 650 micromoles per meter squared per second, so 650 ppfd, that becomes the rate limiting step in photosynthesis. Is so then CO2 becomes the rate limiting step, and so when you go beyond 650, 700 micromoles per meter squared, that's when you do want to add some extra CO2. And the other thing that I've heard, and one thing that we just do because we read it, is that we do want your temperatures to be slightly higher, and especially as Jason was mentioning, if he's getting up to 1,000 micromoles and maybe like 1,500 ppm of CO2, you probably want your temperature around 85, because that's when you can really benefit from a particular coenzyme that's in the photosynthetic, the Krebs cycle. It's called rubisco. You want to be able to produce that to actually benefit from all that CO2. So our recommendation is typically use CO2 when you go above 700 ppfd, and make sure that your temperatures are slightly higher than you may typically use, especially when you get a bit higher. But I'd love to hear any more feedback on that if other people do the same.
Jason's grow is so meticulous. I mean, so meticulous. And I am we're going on to the fourth one. I promise you, we're actually setting them up with some CO2 meters and a couple other things, talking about some stuff. So I definitely will be relaying information back to the group and yourself as well. So I'm actually, like, everyone's always like CO2 doing all these other things. Like, I don't feel anyone tracks their stuff enough nowadays to actually say what's working and not, with one change adjustment. And with Jason, every single thing has been tracked through pictures, audio, video for 9-10 months now, 3 grows, going on the 4th one, going back to the original AK genetics, right? Are we starting with that one again?
No, we're going back to the AK-47.
And then that one will really be able to same genetics, small variations, and like you're saying, and seeing what how much of a difference does it make. So this is going to be exciting.
I think it's interesting. It says when you raise your ppfd up to what, 650, 700 is when you can actually start increasing the CO2. Was that correct, Ab?
Yeah, that's just based on that, your basic understanding of photosynthesis, that CO2 becomes the rate limiting ingredient in photosynthesis, where you have light intensity or light energy plus CO2 gives you glucose and water and so on, right? So that literally comes from one paper that was done back in, I think, the mid 70s. So
because most of the people, like Chris from I forget, he's got another channel, Mr. Grow It, he always mentions that above 1,000 you want to start introducing CO2. So that's where I got my numbers from. But my grow tents are in my bedroom, and their lights are on at night, and we're sleeping in here with them, so we're pumping in the CO2 through our own breathing.
This is going to be really exciting to track this, because we're going to just because those mushroom bags actually take your parts per million, I think, to like 700 or 800 parts per million. So it's just going to slightly increase it just a little bit consistently. and we're just going to measure it. Boom, 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 and actually have measurable statistics that we can share. And that's what the exciting thing is. Yeah. Johnny, what do you think, brother?
I just had a question of what's the like an inside of a house norm and what's outside norm? Like just everyday
400 parts per
outside.
million inside.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, go ahead.
Just for like, just because of the sun is so strong, is there enough oxygen outside? I mean, carbon dioxide outside for the amount of sun there is?
Yeah. So I think the most like ambient CO2 outside is read probably around 500 to 700 from what I'm reading. That seems to be a good average. And I wanted to state, if anybody's on the fringe of wanting to introduce CO2, I recommend buying a cheap or decent meter and testing your house. Cause like with me and my 3 kids, my dog, myself, it's not uncommon for me to be around 13 to 1500 parts per million. Right now my kids are gone, but I'm running around 700 ppm right now. So you'd be surprised. And especially if you have gas appliances in your house, hot water heater, your furnace and stuff like that, that's going to also contribute because you always have a pilot light lit as well. So you'd be surprised, like, where some people are introducing CO2 and you might naturally already be over 1,000, so outside from what I've read is around 500 to 700 parts per million. And the PAR readings are, that from the sun is good a range, and they normally go by high noon, but it could be 9 to 1,000. So I think sometimes we think the sun's producing so much PAR and so much more, but I think, from historically CO2 levels in the earth are actually going down to what they used to be.
I'm going to bring up another product. Hayes, you want to jump in, brother?
Dave pretty much just said everything that I was thinking. Yeah, your home, especially if you have like gas appliances like a furnace or like just pilot lights in general, you just walking around, your overall ppm should be, or not ppm, your overall CO2 level should be around like 900 to, like what Dave was saying, like depending on how many people you have in your house, 1,500 to 1,700. Did I just cut out?
No.
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
I was just sharing my screen so you can see this product right here. It's $79. I think there's another cheaper one too. I'll pull that up too. I think it's like $30 so you can measure your CO2 in your room.
And then if you're in a room or a tents are a bit easier, you can if you just think about what those bags do and what those tanks do, is they just imitate you breathing. So that's what they're doing, is they're not constantly breathing out the entire time. They're letting some out throughout the day and revitalizing that loss that it's taking. But if you're hanging out in your grow and you're actually concentrating on your breathing, you should be providing enough CO2 to. It also depends on how large of a grow it is, but you do put off a lot of CO2, and that's why. However you think about it, like if you have something over your face and you're breathing in your own CO2 for a long time, you'll get oxygen deprivation. You'll end up getting an over toxicity of breathing in too much CO2, and certain things can happen. So that's how much CO2 that we actually breathe out. And plants actually utilize CO2 as well, they utilize oxygen as well as CO2.
Jamery and Paul, I apologize. I'm butchering.
It's Jameer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Jameer, will you please go ahead and share, brother?
I have a quick question. Sorry, it's a little different topic, but on your spreadsheet, you on your first tab, you have auto pots. And I was thinking about moving to a SIP system because of how much I travel and watering and keeping it consistent. Because as a new grower, watering and adding nutrients is probably my biggest struggle. And I stumbled across some research on different forums about another product called Octopots. And I was wondering if anybody had any experience using an Octopot. They have an actual Black Friday sale coming up starting tomorrow. And the biggest issue was right now I'm using advanced nutrients, and I wanted to kind of move to like a Gaia Green, but I don't know how to top dress in a bottom feed system. So I didn't know if that was going to work or it was going to cause some type of issue.
It's autopot.
I think they start. No. I know the autopot. I'm talking about the octopot. It's OCTPOT, octopot.com.
Oh.
I think they're based out of Michigan. Let me see if I can find it. But
And let me know if this is the one
I've
on my
seen-
screen right here.
no, it's not. It's more like I don't know if you can Google it or
Yeah, go ahead.
it's like octopus, but it's octopot instead.
In order for that top dress to work, you'd have to water enough to saturate the whole entire medium.
Right, and that's what I was wondering, because in this octopot system, it tells you.
I mean,
it's not.
tell me,
you're not. Sorry.
I don't know. I was just throwing out an idea. There should be no reason why you can't. I mean, tell me any of anyone why you can't just take a pipe that, and I'm, no one tells me I can't do it until someone tells me I can't do it. Right? Grab a pipe, and drive it down and remove a section of soil, and put some dry amendments down there, and put it in one or two pots if you are top feeding. And then at that point, the microbiologist is able to get to it, release it over time, and water in your top feeding. I don't know. In my mind, that's the only thing I can think of that versus like top feeding just sits there and doesn't do anything. Obviously it'll damage some of the roots, but I don't know. Any opinions on that one?
Hey, Jameer, I think the only way you could really get that to work, and this is typically what we do as our cultivation strategy, is because we use either autopots or anything with a bottom slit, and whether you're using an individual reservoir or using a capillary mat, we try to make a just add water soil. So if you're using Gaia Green, you would just do a really nutrient dense soil, and then add a microbial inoculant and hope that would be your just add water soil, and then you could just go to a bottom irrigation system.
Okay, but what happens though if they aren't able to, they don't amend the soil before the grow, or they need to amend it and they're doing a top feed, or they're doing a bottom feed and the grow's already established? What do you suggest on that?
Yeah, that's where I'd probably go to supplementing with more of a
liquid feed.
Fish hydrolysate, or a kind of organic liquid.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot less damaging to the plant. No, I appreciate that. So, go with what you got. If you don't prepare, you're going to have to slightly adjust, but at least find products that, that are in line with your values, in a sense.
That would just be a system that you wouldn't want to top of.
Hey, so what were you saying, brother?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that that type of system, that growing system, isn't something that you would utilize a top feed for. It's just like what Ab was saying. You would want to stick to that type of system that you're growing in, which is just that bottom feed, and it's running through irrigation lines. So you don't want to run too much stuff in there that has sediments and stuff like that, to where bacterial growth or just sediment could just get built up in that line, and then it can cause even further problems down the road.
Mike, jump in, brother.
I just want to let you go. One of my sponsors just set me up with an 8-pot system, and I haven't pulled that out of the box. That's what I'm doing on Monday. So I'm going to be going down that road, guys. So as you're going to do it, check in with me and ask me how it's going, because I am going to be doing it starting next week.
So what are you? I would definitely like to.
That
maybe I'll hit you on-
autopod system doesn't work very well. We're still playing around with it. So I don't want to say it does work or it doesn't work. We're still playing around with it. It doesn't seem to be auto watering as well as it, marketed out to be. But again, we're still playing with it with one of our clients right now.
One of the things with the Autopot is that their float valves aren't the best. So we actually flip them around. I'll try to do a video of what we do with their float valves, because we've actually talked to Dan Gulliver at Autopot UK to try to change this system because it doesn't work that well. And maybe that's some of the problems you're running into.
So drybacks because the watering isn't properly feeding the plants, or isn't properly watering the plants.
No, it's just the way they've got their float valves. I think it's upside down. So we actually flip their float valve for their individual pots, and it works much better. So that you are, when the plant demand.
Did you get cut off?
To show you what we do to the float valves in the Autopot system.
Johnny, you want to jump in, brother?
I don't know nothing about that system, but I listened to the Dude Grow show, and Scotty from there, he has a little system that he does like that, and he puts the grow dots in there and just lets it go, and that's all. They don't, and he says it works.
I've heard of that too. I've seen it. I was going to mention that the Scotty Rose grow dots or something, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting to hear, about a feed like that. You just throw it in there and just water it. But then it's like, well, I like to make teas too. But I thought that was real interesting. That product.
You still could. It just
you could throw the teas in there.
Yeah, it's just that's extra there. It's just always there if you need it.
I always go by the the law of minimum. Like I always try to go at the least. I'm not trying to do like too much, but what I did see that, and I was like, I don't know, I was a little skeptical, but I haven't used it, so.
Have you guys ever seen that experiment where they have like a cup of water and they have like different amounts, and they put something over the top of it, and then it equalizes itself out? Have you guys ever seen that experiment?
I haven't.
I think we did it in school. If through osmosis. Did I say that name? Osmosis membrane. Did anyone do? Did you ever do that experiment?
Yeah, it's just
I remember that now.
Diffusion. Yeah.
Go say that again.
It's just passive diffusion, where you're just everything will.
And that's what we're doing with those autopots. It's just passive diffusion, right? It's normalizing itself, just like that experiment. And tell me if I'm correct, right? Is that's exactly what's happening? Is it's finding its equilibrium through a wick system of some level?
Yeah.
Is it bad that it keeps the plant in like a state to where it's always searching for like water if it's not? I've seen those malfunction before to where they're not always operating how they should. So it's like the plant will always, it's getting like just enough, but it's not getting like, it's kind of like someone asking for a bottle of water and you're just giving them like a little tiny sip. So it's like they're always at not necessarily a deficiency, but they're not at their optimal. That's the only thing that I've heard go wrong with those.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do a proper dry back, or you don't get to do any drought stress unless you geared it up that way where you could let your reservoir totally dry out. But typically we'll throw a good couple inches of perlite at the bottom. You still use the root guard so your roots don't go too deep into whatever. And it's that way.
How is perlite made? Sorry to stop there. Please continue. But I'd love to dive into that. How is perlite made?
I believe it's mined.
It's just a lot of energy. It's heat and pressure. You take carbon and you put it under heat and pressure, and it turns into this white popcorn.
So it is manufactured. I when I Googled it, it said it was volcanic rock expanded.
Yeah, so you're taking so vermiculite is mica, where this perlite would just be a carbon, volcanic carbon, and then you put it under extreme heat, extreme pressure, and it turns into the white fluff that we know. But yeah, obviously not sustainable, obviously high energy input.
So where do we, okay, so you're saying it can be produced, but it's not produced. It's mined. And so where is it? Is that correct?
No, you're mining the volcanic carbon. You're mining the volcanic rock, and then you go through a treatment.
Then they go through a treatment process. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. That's interesting. I want to visit one of those places. I actually want to put it on video and see how it actually. I was fascinated recently with the story behind it. Adam.
Well, I was listening to an organic grower, and he was talking about perlite, and he was, the one thing he didn't like was that they did mine, they had a mine, because he lived he lived close to where they mined, I guess. So he just seemed like the leveling and all that. I guess that was his only complaint, was that they mined for it and then treated it. But I mean, it's everywhere. So I mean, it's obviously a product that's I don't think it's going to go away. But I mean, that's just from what I understand, they do have to mine to get it. So I think some people who want to grow organic, they may or may not be with that method.
If anyone knows anyone that works at fertilizer plants that do mining, extraction, separation, like all the way from raw materials, I would love to go visit one of those plants and actually put it on recording at some level. So just throwing that out there openly to the channel too. I'd love to get it on this channel. So anyone knows anyone, please let me know. I'd fly in to just do a well thorough job of documentation and interview or something. Any other questions or suggestions, thoughts?
I had a question for Av.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you know anything about short chain saccharides, like oligosaccharides, that are used in they're found in things like fermented plant extracts, and they're pretty much the only type of short chain sugar, or actually form of sugar at all, that the plant sees as available for itself and is able to. This is from Canna's research, that they have a product called Boost, and their research breaks down the actual use of the oligosaccharide, and what it does is it acts as kind of like a polymer, like a saccharide polymer, and then let's see. Let me try to find this first. But do you know anything about have you guys researched anything into oligosaccharides or short chain sugars?
I mean, one of the reasons why we would consume a lot of oligosaccharides as humans is to feed our gut. It's essentially a prebiotic, right? So it is to feed our gut microbiome, and that's
this has to.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, what they were saying was it imitates sort of the plant juices itself. That when you crack the plant open and it has the juice, and that's what you use to measure the Brix level. Whenever you're looking at that, the actual elements that are in there are the different saccharides, the different sugars, and then as well as aminos and other proteins. So what they're finding is that oligosaccharides is, if you use those in those are derived from a plant extract, the plant will use it. It doesn't necessarily take it up, but it uses it as it utilizes its response system, and it allows it to uptake nutrients better, and it allows it to pick up metabolism. So I'll have to send you the research on it. It's kind of hard to break it down, but it's very interesting.
I would see it as a once again a prebiotic. So it's definitely you've captured a root exudate, and you're giving the plant some extra root exudate. So we often just treat root exudates as glucose. Well, glucose is the simplest form of a sugar, and sometimes that only feeds the weediest of the bacteria. So if you can get a legal,
well, no, the whole yeah, the part of the oligosaccharide was that was the only part that the plant would actually utilize it, and no other simple chain sugars or even long chain sugars are utilized by the plant. It's only utilized by the actual bacteria who are actually only digesting part of it.
Right. Yeah. You've almost picked the right food. By, I guess that's what Ken is trying to say, is that we've got the right food, which is
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear your breakdown on that.
Yeah.
Well, actually, just to bring that up as another little bit right there was, I've always wondered, is sugars the right thing to try to feed your microbes? Like, or are we, like you said something right there too. You said it feeds only a limited bacteria. So are we like, should we be giving them minerals? I mean, not sugars, like for in teas and stuff. Like is it necessary to put in a sugar in a tea when you're brewing a tea if you're putting in like a balsamic, like not balsamic rock, like I'm just hungry right now, the rock dust or the azomite or different thing, or drops of balance, things like that? Are you able to get away from the sugar, and the microbiology still has enough what it needs to flourish in the tea system?
And sorry, Mark, was that to me?
Yeah. Do you know? Do you
Yeah.
have any? We were talking about this a little bit, because also the brick levels too. Can't the brick levels lie to you? Because that's why I'm not a big proponent of bricks, because if you're giving them the wrong chemicals, they show up in the leaves not properly. So when you do a bricks, the test can lie to you too. Is my thought process correct or incorrect on that?
Well, you don't have the complete breakdown of what's in those, like in the actual bricks that you're testing. You just have a dissolved solid. You don't have the actual levels of the saccharide levels versus the amino proteins and levels and all that. So all those can be out of whack, and you can still look at that and read a high bricks level. But it's kind of like we were talking with diabetics. Like, you have to know when you have to provide the right types of sugars too as well. So like if you're running a marathon as a human and you're taking in the wrong types of sugar, your body's not going to burn through that sugar fast enough. You need to have something that's simple, like a dextrose, to where your body utilizes that sugar a lot quicker for energy. So it's kind of like similar to these.
So it goes back into sugars, but how about that original question, back to just real quick, back to for both of you guys, either or, I've like the minerals, like if you're feeding the plants the trace minerals, can you get away from the sugars? Like,
yeah, I typically wouldn't recommend using sugars in a tea, other than longer chain polysaccharides like a kelp. If you're going to use kelp meal, that's probably as much of a sugar as I would use in a tea, unless I was looking just to throw in a bit of molasses just before doing a soil drench.
What does keep going? Sorry about that.
I would avoid any simple sugars, because unless you're looking to genuinely go anaerobic, because unless you have a lot of oxygen, you are going to generate way too much bacteria.
This also goes in molasses. Sorry, you're jumping, Hayes.
Oh no, I was saying it's just like feeding your kid candy. Like, it's like feeding them the wrong thing. So sorry, you go ahead.
This also includes molasses too, because I'm not a big proponent of molasses. I don't, but I do understand the value of that. And I think that's because of the trace minerals locked up within the molasses. I think that's the actual benefit why it works. But I think the use of the molasses is just too much sugar for biological teas in general. Is that, what do you guys think? Any one of you guys?
I think that's very interesting. That's very interesting topic, and I think since it is kind of getting like real sciencey, I mean, science works by testing and experimenting. So I think that's where that comes in. I think we got to use it. We definitely got to look, try using a mineral based tea and compare it to a regular tea, and see how it goes. I think that's a great question. Just like a great topic in just overall.
BioAg TM7 is a really good mineral tea.
Which one?
Check
What
with the
product?
BioAg TM7 by Bob Faust.
Dave, can you
These
bring it
aren't
up,
cool.
brother?
What was it? I'm sorry.
BioAg TM7.
And is that a tea already, or is that a
No, it's
mineral?
like
What is that?
it's like a humic powder, but it has minerals in it as well, like all the trace minerals. Or not the trace minerals, all the micro.
Do you have any testing on that? Sorry to interrupt you, Hayes. Do you guys have any actual testing or data on that type of stuff, or Rob as well?
I use it.
I know little bits, but I was going to get into that I thought was interesting. And this has been like where the journeys gets a little crazy. They're getting into like Korean natural farming and getting into like JDOM. Those are like two offshoots where they do these different levels of fermentation. In the Korean natural farming, they actually use brown sugar for a lot of their ferments, almost the majority of them. And then they incorporate these things into soil. They make these IMOs and all these other things. But that was the original gentleman's name is Han Kyu Cho, if I'm not mistaken. His son, Young Sang Cho, actually made JDOM. They do ferments and they actually use no sugar. They use lactobacillus bacteria, and they'll use some indigenous microorganisms to get things going. So there were two totally different schools of thought, but they each. I know they each have their place, only because one of the guys who is a Korean natural farmer, he actually trained under Elaine Ingham, and he bases everything through the microbiology and so forth.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you, Rob. Jumping back over, who said they had actual information? Did you say you guys had information on mineral-based teas versus sugar-based teas?
Not me, but
okay.
Bob Faust, the owner of BioAg, he has a whole plethora of research backing his actual product. Like
and his tea is a mineral-based tea.
Yeah, it starts out as a powder, so it looks like gunpowder almost. So it's almost like humic powder with different micro elements in there.
Interesting. Well, maybe you can send me a link and we'll check them out.
Is that similar to Recharge or anything like that?
No, it's literally it does have humic contents to it, but it's mainly to cover your micro elements. So like your
what's the name of it?
BioAg, so like bio, BIO.
Dave, can you pull that up? BioAg.
And then Bob Faust is the creator of it. He's the owner of the company. They've done a bunch of literature and all types of university studies.
Mark, I think you'd enjoy interviewing Bob. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Do you know him? Av?
Yeah, I could. Sorry. Yes, yeah, I can send you his contacts.
I'm really looking forward to just bringing more content, healthy content to the surface. I mean, guys, we're going on 2.5 hours right now, and we've brought up 4 or 5 products that, don't probably get much marketing. They don't, no one's probably ever heard of them, and they need a little bit of more attention, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of community to just talk it out a little bit. Sometimes you get into a little boring dialogue, but you just stick around and wait till the good parts come back out. And I think just bringing these products, thank you so much, because I am really looking forward to, I want to get into these guys. Even guys in universities, they get stuck in the bottom of basements, and they need attention. The work they're doing, the plethora of information that's coming out, and it's just staying in their little orbit, right? And we need to bring these types of people to the surface so that they're getting their viewpoints and attention to to you guys, to larger scale agriculture people that actually have the ability to alter their decision making on a daily basis to, grow healthier food and better medicine. Guys, anything else? What do you guys think? Anything else you guys want to share?
One thing to just touch on the sugars with the bacteria. Hard to just come up with explanations off the cuff, but a good thing to think about it is they already know what type of sugar, that bacteria knows what type of sugar that they want, and that's the exudates from the actual plant itself, because they have an actual job that they're actually there to do, and they have a food source that they're willing to exchange to the plant for its actual sugars and stuff like that. So as you're feeding it a sugar source that is foreign to it, it's going to end up going to that and be reliant on that. It can end up bringing energy away from working with the plant, and it's just taking away at that point. So maybe adding it once to just force the community and the tea, and then add it, and then from there it should grow from that point on.
So it's going to go to the cheaper source of energy quicker, and it could potentially just break its normal use of, or its normal food rhythm.
Yeah, it has the potential of it. So it's like having your kid with like, oh, here's a cool steak dinner right here, but here's also some gummy worms over here. They're gonna end up going to the, not always, but it has the potential to do that. So it's just always something to keep in mind.
Johnny, brother. Thank you,
All right.
Hayes. I always appreciate you, man.
Also, when I was at the show this weekend, I came across a company that had a living soil, and he really pushed it really good. It was Detroit Nutrient Company, and he said he put his cell phone number on the bag and said, if you have any problems with it, you can call me.
Okay,
And
let's pull him up. I like that type of shit. Dave, what's his name?
It's Detroit Nutrient Company.
Detroit Nutrient Company. Dave, will you please pull him up when you get a second? Detroit Nutrient Company.
I got 5 bags from him for $100, and I'm going to try it on my next run. And he said from start to finish, all you have to do is add water. He said all the nutrients are there from start to finish, is up to a 9-10 week flower, even through veg and everything. You don't have to add anything to it. Is that true with the living soil? Is it going to have plenty to make it
Johnny, if that's true, then going back to the other gentleman's question about the autopots, right? Get a super soil, put it in the autopots, grow your auto seed, you're good to go. And that's what you're discussing right there. And if you can find an actual good, healthy, decent soil that has this stuff in there, I mean, we're talking about a cook time, right? So a cook time, it should have been by the bag time, and by the time it gets to you, that microbiology, normally they try to dry this soil out, but a lot of times the soil, there is moisture in that bag. So if there's moisture in the bag, there's microbiology going, and if there's stuff in the bag, it should be somewhat bioavailable by the time it gets to you too. So, you get a good brand, there should be no reason why you can't make your life easy with the autopot, like what Av is talking about as well.
That was it right there. That Great Lakes in the blue bag. Yeah, that one right there. If you could zoom in on that little scroll at the bottom, it has his phone number right down there on it.
That's funny.
He even gave out business cards at the show with his phone, his personal phone number on it, and said, man, you got any problems, you just have to call me. He goes, but I don't have anybody calling me. So that just tells you I don't, it works. So I'm going to try it, can't go wrong with it. I don't have to pay shipping on it at least.
Sterile, great. So it looks like he sells some amendments too. You know what? We'll see what happens. We're going to follow up with the product in the future, and Johnny, let us know what the soil's like. Adam, and then Black. Oh, let's go to Black Sheep first, just because we haven't heard from you in a while. And then we'll jump over to Adam and then Mike.
Hello. Just wanted to add my perspective on the biology, and that definitely the different types of sugars and interactions, I think, play a big role. But I like to think of it in terms of turnover, because
these microorganisms don't live forever. And it's really like, how quickly, are they dying? How quickly are they eating and then being eaten by something else to give up their nutrients? So I kind of tend to think, like there's constant turnover, and therefore, organic is always the best way, but it's just, I think of terms of turnover, not necessarily like the same bacteria is going to live forever and it's going to be able to decide what it eats, if that makes sense.
Shelf life. You're discussing shelf life and microbiology, and that a topic has come up multiple times, that when you put microbiology in a bag and it says it has all these species, by the time you use that product, does it still have all those species, or has one species dominated all those other species in the bag, which sometimes, a bag of 10 or 20 species could drop, be down to 4 by the time you actually use the product, which I've heard that many times. And the only people that really know that are the people that actually are testing their product. Most people, they test it once and then that's their COA they use for all their marketing. So
Bottled microbes are really resilient because they actually have to breed those for high salinity and aqueous environments and stressful environments. So they're actually bred to be a bit more resilient than actual native soil microbes, like in their actual native environment, which would be the medium. So if you do buy bottled microbes, and you add those in, they could be a bit more resilient, more what's the word I'm looking for? Accustomed to a stressful environment. So that way they're not dying off quicker. And even if they do die off and you're re-inoculating, it shouldn't be too bad because they do have actual nutrient stores within themselves once they actually do die.
Mike.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the guy with the soil that our friend brought up would be a great guy to interview. And the reason why is because, I'm growing in a living soil and I want to reuse my soil in my 10-gallon pots. But my question is, once I harvest the plants that are in it right now, okay, what do I do? Do I rip out the root ball? Do I just cut off the stem? Do I need just to amend by the top that soil? Because in my garden I got so much room that I take out the plants that I'll plant beside it or whatever. So I like to leave the root system there to have natural pathways. But how is it going to work in my 10-gallon pot?
Rob, you wanted to add something into that?
Yeah, no, I was going to get into, because a lot of the stuff that I've been reading into is the regenerative soil, but what everything seems to be very paramount on is ultimately the size of the pot. So depending on how much space you have in that pot, a lot of the living soil stuff, I saw some of these guys were using 30-gallon containers because they were saying at that point you can pretty much just water and go, because your plant will constantly give its roots out and be able to pull the nutrients it needs. Where like a 10-gallon, but he would have to re-amend, and then just wondering how tight the space would be between the root. But they say you always let the root actually break back down into the soil. It's more beneficial, and you won't disturb your rhizosphere.
Thank you, brother. I always appreciate you, Rob. Guys, anything else? What do you guys think? I mean, we're doing pretty good. We're writing, creating close to just past 2.5 hours. You guys have any other thoughts, questions, ideas, suggestions?
I had a thought on the tea. On my last grow, I didn't use a tea till I seen it start to flower, and even then, I waited like 2 weeks into it. Before that, I just gave it water, and I amended the soil myself. I just turned the ground in my backyard, and I just went with that. Amended it with a decent topsoil, an organic one that I found at my local hydroponic store, and I let it ride all the way through veg. And as soon as I seen it start to flower again, I just let it go into flower for about a week or two. Then I gave it a tea, I believe like 3 times. I harvested in October, mid-October, and I think if I was to have given it the tea earlier, I don't know. I think maybe I would have maybe not have been so as successful as having some decent medicine. So I just kind of let it go organic first, then tea, because I know it really stresses the plant out when it's going through the flower stage. So I just kind of wanted to help it go through that stage, as opposed to like trying to shove it down its throat. I was just trying to assist it in its growth.
Rob, going to jump in, then Dave, or Dave, jump in. I haven't heard from you a little bit, and then Rob, and then I'm going to pull up some COAs from one of our growers this year that pulled in like 33% on his plants, first time grower ever. And his parts per million on his microbiology wasn't ever higher than 500 parts per million.
No, I was just going to bring up that one of our live viewers, Jeremy's asking about pith, and he didn't go into depth, but I'm assuming he might be talking about more solid stems versus hollow stems. I know amongst the communities, there's a lot of talks that with those internal structures, some say it's genetics, others say it's the grower, their nutrients. There's a lot behind that. If anyone wants to talk about that, me and my observations, I kind of think it favors kind of within genetics. But if anyone else wants to elaborate on it, Ave, anybody?
I'm a little distracted now. I'm pulling up those COAs. And if you, Dave, you want to dive into it a little bit more, explain a little bit more, go ahead.
I don't have anything else to add to that.
Okay. Well, then neither do I. I'm going to pull up these COAs. Just because I mean, this guy killed it this year, and I actually want to show you guys literally just when you're just doing so well, man, with the microbiology yeah, right here. You guys go and talk about whatever you guys want. I just want to pull this up as proof of concept. I just got to hide the person's address. All right, save that one. Then we're going to pull this one. Guys, start talking. We're live.
Yeah,
YouTube.
I know.
Well, one suggestion for people is
I'm just curious to see what you're going to pull out, Mark. I'm just waiting to see what you're going to do.
It's going to take me a second. It's taking me a second to pull it up.
So
I wonder how many people are like.
So this is basically you're going to give us the numbers with how much the guy produced using his growing system, or yeah.
All microbiology, his teas were never more than 500 parts per million, all living soil. And yeah, it's just, I mean, the guy rocked it this year. And you saw him, he was over in Oklahoma, passed all his microbials, passed all of his testing, produced, I don't know, like 150, 160 pounds, first time grower ever. Not, just, setting up the greenhouses this year and just rocked it.
Is this the person that you showed the beautiful greenhouses that had the excellent setup? It was all brand new.
Yep, it was that person right there. I'm just pulling up his COAs, and this is where we're talking about, right? Like what, when we're discussing the best growing techniques for growing your plants, I always go back to the terpenes. I'm like, if you can show me the terpene profiles, I can actually say, okay, this growing technique I think was the healthiest way to grow these plants. And then also you look at quantity. So you have this, everyone's judging on the THC or CBD, that being the main oil, and then the terpenes, in my viewpoints, the quality, and then you have the yield too. So you have these different aspects of quality, of yield, and then quality. And so let me pull up the first one right here. I'm gonna go and share the screen. And and this is where I think people kind of just need to be the believers. Can you guys see my screen? Let me see if
Yes,
I
we can.
Okay, so right here, oh, so let me pull up the other one actually. So right here, you see all the paths right here. He has 11% moisture. He can actually increase that moisture. He dried his product out, in my opinion, a little too much, and he's shooting himself in the foot. So he can increase his moisture, which will increase his yield and his overall quantity. And then total THC was 25.6. Total cannabinoids is 30.69. And then you have basically 2% of terpenes. So what is that? That's 33% of this plant is oil. Okay. Microbiology, first time grower in Oklahoma. And he passed, and that's just one of them. You pull up the other one, he had something like 25%, 26% of the total plant was oil, meaning terpenes plus THC and total cannabinoids. So
And
I just, yeah.
what was the strain was he growing?
This one was cookies, I believe, cookies and cream #1. And the other one I'll have to pull up was purple Dutch or something like that. And,
so it's an indica strain, or it's a sativa?
See, I'm a grower. I don't like people. I don't know the strains. Like Johnny, go and jump
Me
in.
neither
I
do
don't know them like other people know them. You know, I'm not like that. I know the plant. That's my forte.
Pretty
Johnny, go
impressive.
ahead, brother.
25. Outside,
I didn't.
all in the greenhouse?
All
sorry.
greenhouse. Yes, sir.
That just made me think about one of your past videos that you did about one of your clients used Jiffy Pots on his first grow. And I did that my first grow, and it messed the plants all up. And I was like, man, if it wouldn't have been for that, it would have been a whole lot better return, for all that weight. Because once I pulled the plant up and saw the root ball wasn't there like it should have been, it was all jacked up. And I was like, man, but I did get something out of it at least. It just sucks that it wasn't as good as it could have been. This next one, the next one's always better. And so it was just made me think about that. It can go right the first time, and it for him, just like him, it went perfect. For me, I had a problem, but I figured it out just by one of your videos, because I was trying to figure out why my plants aren't doing that good. And it was like at the same time you put that video up and was like, Jiffy Pots aren't the best.
It's a sphagnum peat moss. The sphagnum peat moss doesn't break down. The cocoa coir fiber ones will. And so it's just important. Small things, small adjustments.
It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that article, because it really made me thought how much a little mistake like that can make a big difference on the end of your yield. You start off as your root lock like that, and you're not knowing why, and you're trying to treat for all kinds of deficiencies, and it really isn't in the deficiencies because it's the roots, right? So it makes you, it just goes to show me how a little thing can change, a little mistake can change your outcome at the end of your growth.
Absolutely. Guys, anything else? If not, I'm going to go on and wrap up the call. Any questions from the viewers? Guys, anyone out there for the future, it's just not a membership call, like ask questions. Yeah, I love the Johnny call. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video as a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it, guys. And then also the people watching as well, post questions on the next video. Dave's always on there. He's replying. Obviously we're going to bring him back up and answer them for you guys. The reason why we do the membership call is because we do you've been watching this, there's a level of like development we all have. Like we're getting more disciplined on our control, like muting things and trying to be proactive, and also bring on more professional people that have degrees that can explain more stuff and help shorten our own learning curve. So if you guys want to be part of those calls, check out the membership is $2.99. You'll get invited to our private Telegram. It's a free flow. If you guys want to post about gardening, your questions get normally a little more attention, and then you guys get the opportunity to jump on these types of calls and kind of, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not sure what Ob charges, but he probably charges anywhere from, $200 an hour. Who knows how expensive agronomists costs. And right here, these guys got the opportunity to talk to him one-on-one for an hour or two of his available time. The last call, which was Saturday, Chris got on the call from Mr. Grow It for about an hour or so, and so for literally $2.99, as we develop our Rolodex of people and bring them on, we're just trying to bring more of an open dialogue and a community, so there's not this disconnection from the consumers to the people that are producing products or producing content, because it's important. If there is too much of a disassociation, the culture is lost, and that's when big corporations come in and are able to, take advantage of the marketplace while everyone's a little bit confused, and that's not what we want to do, right? So, guys, you guys want to say goodbye to the channel?
Hey, you guys all been great. I enjoyed it tonight, and I'm happy to see 20 people. That's the first for us. And I wish you all happy growing, guys, and I hope to see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yeah, same here. I wanna
Good
wish
night,
everybody
everybody.
happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for coming to the call. And yeah, man, much love.
Appreciate you guys. Hit up Adam. I think Adam's going to be giving it away. Hit him up on his private Telegram. I think he's giving away some seeds that you guys can discuss that on a private level.
For sure.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyone else, guys, want to say goodbye to the channel? Say what's up. Thank you guys for your support.
Yeah.
I just want
Hey,
to
everybody.
thank everybody for viewing that's out there. Make sure if you want to become a member, you can be on these live calls asking questions, or you're giving your advice as well. We need everybody in the community to do so. So we have we're going to be continuing our down to earth drops, going over individual amendments and furthering our knowledge with those. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate you out there. And yeah, have a safe, wonderful holiday and happy growing.
All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the call. Have a great one.
Appreciate you. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.